pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence in respect to the men and women in uniform who serve us in our community, around the country, and overseas. Thank you. Be seated. For those of you who've picked up a copy of the agenda, it looks like it's a pretty involved meeting tonight. It's actually just some, mostly a lot of administrative discussions of things we have to get through pretty quick so we can decide how we're going to close this out, what our final meeting schedule is going to look like. Are we going to invite any other additional guests to come so that we can ask questions, or if they have additional information they'd like to share with us. Scheduling a public hearing, which we had at one point indicated we would do before we take our final vote. Our final vote is due in the near future so that we have time to write a report, which our draft report is by August 26th. So we have time to work these things out. It's just we want to set a final schedule of dates. We had a couple of meetings that we canceled. There's been a little bit of schedule collaboration efforts. We canceled one. Okay, the truth be known, it was Lara's child's birthday, and we didn't want her here while the child was having a birthday party. So we just used other excuses to.
We appreciate it.
Yeah. So, we just have some things we wanted to talk about to close things out. So the first thing on the agenda is I received a call from Mr. Clark, who would like to appear in public comment. So, Reed, you're invited up to let us know what you have to say to us tonight.
Right now?
Sure.
Oh,
You're first on. You've got the agenda. You're right there. You're number one.
I can read. Reed Clark, Stonehenge Road. Am I right so far?
You're good so far, Reed.
I will be up here all the time asking you or telling you or suggesting to you that it would be a mistake for you to change the charter in any way. And I have several reasons for this. One, if you'll notice behind me, it's a packed house. Whether you're pro or con, there doesn't seem to be too many people in the audience that are either pro or con, or have no idea what they're going to talk about. But that's one side of the subject. The other side of the subject is, as people come into town, you'd think that they would at least try the way New Hampshire's been run for 300 years. And yet they don't seem to be interested in that. I hear people that say, I want to vote, I want to vote. That's good, I'm glad they do. But it'll be voting for what 3 out of 5 of the people on the council believe in. They won't be able to make their own suggestions except in a deliberative session where few people can attend, especially if you put a limit on the amount of people that have to attend. The way it is now, this year we saved several $1,000s in the town meeting by having someone come up and make a suggestion as to how we could lower our taxes. I think it's very important that people have a say. And unfortunately, nobody is really having a say except this turkey who's around all the time talking about how it should be not changed. And I think I have valid reasons for saying it shouldn't be changed. If no one comes, if no one is interested in the politics of this town, then why change it? I mean, if 180 people come at every meeting, and I'm using that fictitious term, then fine. Why change it? It's not going to change any by switching to SB2 at all. It's not going to change a bit. As a matter of fact, it may be even better because some of the 180 people that come may have ideas which help the town. I was in the Foreign Service for 40 years, and whenever we went to another country, we did what they did in the other country, whether it's taking their shoes off before going in the house or not eating certain foods or whatever they may be. Well, when people from all the other states come to New Hampshire, it seems to me that they should be trying out how New Hampshire works and not how we can make it more like New Jersey or Massachusetts or Nebraska. I just don't understand why people that move here don't try the water, jump in and swim a little bit. If they don't like it, then come up and make a suggestion about a change. So therefore, I would strongly suggest to you that you put it off a year or make a judgment that because of the lack of interest, that we will put it off a year and work on it that way. Or I guess that's all I have to say. It's just thank you very much for letting me say it.
Thank you, Reed.
You mind if I ask some questions? Reed? Reed, I'd like to just run some stuff by you here for a few, if I may. And there are basically some questions here concerning this here. And the reason why it is because when you were talking, what came to my mind, that you said you wanted to leave it the way it is. Well, it was changed a few years ago. The charter was changed. The town used to be selectmen. Before selectmen, the town was something else they were called. And then they went to council.
Only selectmen.
Right.
Right.
It has been changed a few times, the charter. Now, my question to you is, where you say this is a mistake, would you believe that the deliberative session pretty much is the same as a town meeting with no quorum?
No.
Why is that? Why would you say it's not?
Oh, with no quorum?
With no quorum, it's the same town meeting, deliberative session, same thing. There's only one difference.
Yes, there's,
Two, I'll say, in my opinion.
yeah, well, there's a few differences. The type of the budgets, what the two budgets are and stuff like that. There's a lot of differences. The thing is, when you have everybody vote, they are voting for just three out of the best five of what you want. What the council wants. They are not letting their own opinions be voiced. That's the important thing. The important thing that in a deliberative session you won't get that. It'll still be what the three people want, and a person can come up and make a speech and maybe turn one of the people around and have them change their mind, but they can't change what the original statement is.
I just follow up.
Yes.
I actually have a few here that, because my mind was clicking when you were talking. I would hope that you would read the RSA, because a deliberative session and a town meeting with no quorum is the same. Now, you talked about the military. I don't know if they had absentee ballot. Me being retired, and there's other veterans that served in, I don't know who, in a war or wherever, we voted absentee ballot. Now, my son, along with many other veterans, are disenfranchised because they do not get an opportunity to vote at a town meeting, but if there was a SB2, they get an opportunity to vote absentee.
What's that got to do with anything?
Has to do with them exercising their constitutional right to vote.
About the 5 people that are making their decision.
The 5 people do not make the decision in the council with a deliberative session.
They do.
They do not. The people out there with no quorum make the decision, just like at a town meeting. Same thing. And somebody else can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I wanted to make sure that we understood that. We are, in today's military, disenfranchising our voters, because if one veteran does not, in my opinion, misses out on getting a chance, opportunity to vote, then we went against our constitutional rights there, that, to give them that opportunity. And the law of the land on absentee ballots on veterans. We just changed the law in New Hampshire on that, by the way, to expand it so we make sure they all get a chance to vote. That's all I had.
That's your opinion. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Reed, and thank you for entertaining the questions. Anybody else have any questions up here, commentary on Reed's remarks? Is there anybody else from the public who'd like to come forward? I know we have a couple of guests. Sir, if you'd please come up, give us your name and address, and let us hear from you.
Good evening. My name is Fred Hessel. I live at 4 Woodbine Drive, and I've only had 6 years to drink the water and try it, but
Can
hopefully
you give us the
that's
spelling of your
enough to
last
make
name? Can you give us the spelling of your last name to make sure we have it?
H-E-S-S Sam L-E-R, not F-F,
Thank you.
Heffler. 4 Woodbine Drive. So as I said, I've been a resident of this town for 6 years, and I've had the privilege over the last 30-some years to spend time at 2 towns in Massachusetts, one of which had a town meeting form of government and one of which didn't. Also spent some time in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and as I said, the last 6 here. I'm not particularly happy with the present form of government for the town of Londonderry. I don't like the fact that some things are voted on by ballot and other things are voted on at town meeting, and that things that happen at town meeting could actually override things that happened at the balloting session 3 days before, 4 days, whatever it is before. I would assume that if there is a motion to reconsider anything that happened during the ballot session, that it could be brought back up at the town meeting session and changed. And I don't think that's fair to those who may not be able to attend the town meeting session, but who were willing to and took the time to vote for both the school budget and the town meeting warrant articles that were available on the ballot. I personally like to see everything laid out in front of me, to see the whole warrant. And fortunately, we get to see the whole warrant. We just don't get to vote on it all at the same time. So I find this is it seems to me it's an inefficient manner. Now, the town of Grafton did everything on town meeting, and that was the way it ran, and I lived there for 14 years, and that was fine, and I accepted that. So that town meeting would sometimes, and it probably happened here in Londonderry before you change the form of government, that town meeting sometimes would be 1 evening, sometimes it would be 2 evenings, sometimes it would be 3 evenings, depending upon what was on the warrant, what type of voting had to be done. Was it voice, was it hand, was it written, how much discussion there was, so I agree with Mr. Clark that, we do what we need to do in the area where we are to participate in the government. I just believe that the process we have now is not the most efficient or effective that it could be. And as we've seen, we really don't get the turnout, except perhaps during the balloting session, that we should. So I would really like to thank the commission for, or you people, for serving on this commission, bringing out all these things, my opinion, Mr. Clark's opinion, everyone else's opinion, bringing in folks from outside who can shed light on the differences in our government. And I would just like you to know that I, as one member and one voting member in the town of Londonderry, would like to see a change so that everything is on the ballot and that we get to do it all at one time.
Marty?
If I may, thank you for coming forward, first
You're
of all,
Definitely.
and giving us your opinion. But out of the places you've lived, okay, which form of government did you like the best, and what was it?
I like it where everything is on the written ballot. You vote on it one time. And we had it under a couple different forms of actual government. There was mayor council, there was council, business manager, but in most cases there was a fairly strong council. Again, there was deliberative, or something like a deliberative session. Council meetings, of course, just like ours, were always open. Before items went on the ballot, there was public input, there was voting, there was things like that. I like that form better. I'd like to see that ballot in the local paper, or in some cases in one of the towns we lived in New Jersey. Each voter in the town was mailed a copy of a sample ballot before we went in there. But seeing it in the local paper is fine because it lays it all out. You have an idea before you walk in there and get those pieces of paper. Just what is where. And you have an opportunity to ask questions. You have an opportunity to seek information if you're not sure. And seeing it like that and not piecemealing it, really helps. So I like that form of government better where it's all done once.
Just to follow up to all that, with all those forms of government, it sounds like at each one, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you voted town budget separately, town budget and warrants separately from school warrants and budgets. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So you're fine with that?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Now, normally they would be done the same day, similar to what we do here.
We don't
There
do
would be a
this.
school budget
Oh,
ballot and a town
Okay, the
warrant.
vote, yeah.
That's our
Yeah,
Tuesday.
yeah, the Tuesday
Same
ballot.
day.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank
Again,
you.
to make it more efficient and effective, save money.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No, the judge
Yes,
is-
I wanted to just add to you, would you, on our form of government here, I'll use the school side. There's only about 7 towns in the whole state that are SB2 that have a quorum like we have in the whole state. So we are different than many other towns. Other towns that would have the deliberative session do not have no quorum because I've sat in 2 or 3 of them. Okay, now, Lexington, I went down there just because they spend a week in their town meeting. They use the old form. Those people in Lexington go every day. So I just wanted to make sure I threw that out for, consumption. And I want to thank you for coming forward. And, because there's nobody out there, apparently I look at it at the voters voted us in and have confidence in our fidelities and abilities to make the right decision. And that's in my thought process. But thank you.
Just one thing. Now, when you talk about consolidation onto one ballot, I mean, I understand that. I'm wondering, would somebody in your position be apt to go to the deliberative session if there was a 0 quorum number? Just to give input on what was going to be on the ballot?
Well, I think that depends upon what we believe is going to be on the ballot. Obviously, the more controversial any warrant article is, the more input there'll be, whether it's a town meeting or a deliberative session or just the election itself. So I guess I think the answer to your question would be yes, but if there are things on there that to me are completely innocuous,
What's the
then why
sense?
bother?
Right.
Okay, it's fine. The people we elected made a good decision. There are things on there that are for the betterment of, or what I believe is the betterment of our community, I'm not sure that would need to go to that deliberative session. But if there are issues that need input, then yes, I believe I would.
You
go
felt
to
like
that
you
session.
had a say in whether or not it was going to change on the ballot.
Yes.
You had a, yeah.
Anyone else? Mr. Hessler, I just had one more question. As you can see, our meetings are attended by large swarms of people.
Yes.
And yours is a fairly new face to these hearings. I'd just like to ask you, what was it that prompted you to come tonight to this meeting? Was there a particular?
Yeah, I think it's because no one else appeared to be coming.
Okay.
And it wasn't because I knew Mr. Clark was coming and he might have a different opinion than I, and it wasn't because of that. It was because, as everyone's pointed out, they didn't appear to be well-attended, so I thought you should hear something from some of the voters. And I'm sure that you're hearing things from the voters anyway, from your neighbors, from your friends, from people you don't want to be your neighbors or friends, but you're hearing from them. But I thought in a public forum, I should come in and, thank you for taking the time to do this and giving you one person's opinion.
Well, I thank you for that.
Yes, thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public who has any comments for us tonight before we move on to public hearing? All right, with that, we had old business. We didn't have any to discuss tonight, so we want to go ahead and move on to public session. I don't think I need a motion to go into that. We'll just go right into it.
Make a motion, we go to public session.
I'll second.
All those in favor going into public session, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're in public session. Ma'am, would you like to come up and join us? And I have to apologize for either I lost track of the email where Susan Hickey gave me your name and information, or I never got one. Yes, please, come right up to the
Right in the hot seat.
hot seat.
I have some handouts, so maybe I should do that first. I am Jeannie Sams from the Department of Revenue, and I am the municipal advisor for the town of Londonderry. I have 47 towns who I supervise. I do their tax rates in the fall, and part of my job is to go around and try to do workshops to help with SB2 or budget workshops, depending upon what people want me to do. This evening, before I came here, I also did a couple of tax collector visits because I also supervise the tax collectors in my towns. So it's been a busy day. So I'll hand these out first.
You have a card also?
You know, I left them out in the car, so why don't you pass those?
Did the commissioner give you the day off tomorrow for helping us out here tonight?
Did you put it in? No. Are you kidding? I didn't say anything.
And we can erase that part of the tape.
He knows that one.
I think we might already have this one.
You probably do. I don't know if the public has those forms, though. So if it's all right, I'll hand them out. You could do mine are color coded, so. Budget crunch, that's right. Susan told me to bring about 20. I tried to find out if there are particular questions you would like answered, but.
Oh, nice.
Oh.
We have this. We have this, I got that.
Because Londonderry has a council and a charter, it's a little bit different than some of my other SB2 towns. But is there a particular area you'd like me to concentrate on?
I think some of the specific questions that we've talked about before, and they are still on our list of open items. For wrapping this up, there were a couple of things we asked. We talked at one of our previous meetings about the forms that are filled out that define what the default budget is. And this is not a RSA coded methodology, but a methodology on the form that has to at least be explained. And one of the questions that came up at that meeting where we were discussing the forms was whether or not DRA takes an active role in checking the forms and the methodology for each one that's submitted.
Now, are you just referring to the default budget, or are you
Just
referring to all the forms?
Just referring to the default budget itself.
Basically, DRA does not get involved with the default budget. And I jokingly said earlier, it's because it's a political hot form. And the reason I said that is because it's up to the governing body to create that default form. And they have to justify what is on that default form, because basically it is last year's budget with any plus or minuses, contracts, or 1 year, one-time expenditure or something. DRA cannot go in and say, okay, this is a good one, this is a bad one, this is a good one, because we don't go in and audit books. So we don't know what's on last year's budget. We know what you had voted in as appropriations, but when it comes right down to it, at the end of the year, it's the governing body who knows what's actually spent and what is a one-time contract, a one-time expenditure, what is a contract, what's been encumbered because you have a contract in force and it hasn't been completed yet. So default budgets at this point, you are required to do them, you're required to post them, but the Department of Revenue does not look at them.
And I would tell you that that matches kind of verbatim the answer that we got when we asked. We asked 2 local officials.
Oh, good.
And that was the answer that we got. And some of the questions that we're actually asking of the DRA's office or Secretary of State's office or the town attorney's office are confirming other statements made in the meetings, just so that we have it on record that the statement was accurate. And so that's part of what's going on. I'm looking real quick to see if I had any other ones. Marty, you have something?
Yeah, I just have a question. I know when they prepare the default budget, it's then presented as a default budget, and everybody really pays attention more to the proposed budget. If an individual doesn't believe that the default budget is accurate, can it be changed at the deliberative session?
Yes, it can. The governing body is the only one that can change the budget unless you've adopted, I think it's RSA 4014 or something like that, where the budget committee does it. Londonderry does not have a budget committee per se. They have an advisory budget committee.
Right.
So the governing body, with new information at the deliberative session, can amend the default budget. If they do, they complete a new default budget, and that has to be reposted.
And then you'd have to meet again?
No, they do not have to meet again.
Okay.
That's a kind of interesting question, Marty.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard anything leading me to think that that was a possibility before.
On one of those handouts, it's, there's a section on there that says something about the default budget can be. Is that where it is? Okay.
So this can be done at the final statement is interesting. It can be done at any time before the ballots are printed, provided an amended default budget form is prepared. So that means it can be done between a deliberative session and the printing of the ballot. So there's about in some of these calendars, there's about a 2.5 to 3 week window, depending on when they're gonna go to print.
Yes.
So there's an opportunity there. That's interesting. I think that's something key that we ought to capture in our report either way we go, with what our final recommendations are. Does anybody else
Yes, I can.
we got more questions down this way, so Steve?
But since the default budget is, by definition, a list of those items that are contractual in nature, isn't it unlikely that there would be a change in that 3-week period between the time that default budget was posted and the deliberative session? And the second part to that question, do you know of any time that the default budget has ever been changed?
I do have a couple of communities who have changed their default budget after the deliberative session, and it usually occurs because one of the taxpayers who participates,
After the deliberative session?
yeah,
Not
because
at the deliberative session?
they do not have to make the change at the deliberative session. They can go back into a public session and discuss the default budget and make recommendations to change it then. The towns that have done that, usually it's because someone in the audience has said, I question why the default budget is this, this, and this. And at that point, the governing body will decide whether or not what they have is true and correct, or whether it needs to be amended.
Thank you.
Any other?
Yes.
Hal?
Now, when you say the governing body, under the chapter 40, is with the people there that are voting at a deliberative session, like at a town meeting, wouldn't that be the final say until it goes to the polls?
You're not talking about the default budget now, you're talking
okay.
about warrant articles?
On any budget? You know, either the budget or the default, I mean, they're pretty much the same. Can the other budget be changed?
Yes.
Okay.
Anything can be changed at the deliberative session.
By the
default
voters?
budget, no. The default budget can only be amended by the governing body.
So I think I understand that. So we have an understanding that it's locally determined.
Okay.
All
It
right.
was a mistake.
The DRA does not supervise the completion of the form, only that the form is complete.
Correct.
Right? They don't supervise the methodology. The local governing body could, if prompted based on something that comes forward, change it after the deliberative session. And that's the extent of it.
But it's the
The
governing
voters
body.
themselves at the deliberative session cannot change the default budget.
Right. the
They can
default,
only
right.
identify, hey, I question this. Governing body goes away and looks at it and goes, yeah, there might be something here, and they change it.
That's correct.
So it's clear as mud to me.
I have a follow-up for
I was a
it.
little confused, but then,
Yeah.
then it came out, what,
Right, so that's just the default, not the...
Yeah, so that's just the default, so set that part aside, I guess.
Under the, where you talked about under RSA 40:14B, are there many towns, because we have elected body budget committee, are there many towns that utilize that budget committee's budget?
Right off the top of my head, I can't think of any of my towns that has the budget committee do the default budget.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? There was one other thing that we asked about, I'm trying to understand my notes in the question.
the 3 times. Would she be the one, remember Marty was saying somebody could put a petition on, somebody in the town, we could have 3 articles about the same, or 2 articles about the same thing or something?
Yeah, we'd like to get some clarification, if you can kind of understand where we're going with this.
Yes.
We'd like to get some clarification on
I can't
items
remember
going
exactly what it
on
was.
the ballots. And you've heard people say that there's a perception that things that have gone on the Tuesday ballot can then be changed. And can you give us your perspective on that type of environment, what we might be dealing with there?
You mean as they are now? Because on your ballot now, you elect your officers and you vote for bonds.
Yes.
Right, on your ballot, and probably your planning and zoning articles?
Planning and zoning are not voted on through town meeting anymore.
When that was brought up,
It's a budgetary town only.
Just budgetary,
Just
town meeting
budgetary.
only.
when that was brought up, I was trying to rack my brain as to whether or not that was true, because the bond is on the ballot, and if it passes, can it be reconsidered? I don't know. Salem, I know, does their bonds and their operating budget differently than any other town I have to deal with. I will have to research that. I don't know.
If you could, and then just email back an answer, that would be fine. I would just, I tried to ask the question without any kind of leading commentary, because I'm familiar with the perception that's out there. I'm also familiar with that it's not a true perception. There is a perception that if something is voted on Tuesday and it fails, it can come back and be voted on Saturday at our budgetary town meeting in the same form and format, and that's not necessarily correct.
It doesn't sound to me that it would be an accurate statement, but
It would not be a
Research
properly
it.
noticed bond, so it
Correct.
would not have been through a properly noticed bond hearing. So there's a number of other legalities about it being voted on as a bond. It could, however, and we had this case pop up, and I'm not singling you out, Ann, but we had this case popped up where we had a fire station bond a couple of years ago that failed, and it was introduced as a one-time expenditure at the town meeting, which would have been a one-time budget increase. And that brings me up to the question that I wrote down before, and that's what we were talking about. So that was actually not the same thing. It was the same physical building that somebody was seeking to have built, but in the technicality of how things are voted on, it was not the same issue, because it was not a bond, it was a one-time plus-up of the budget. So that came up, the questions we were looking at, and it might not be that this would be in your purview to answer, because it's talking about what we could write into the charter if we were to vote as a charter commission to recommend the town go forward with SB 2. Could we write in there language specific to defining one-time items? And we had an answer to that from local representation that was like, no, we can't. And we still have that as an open legal question that would have been answered by a Secretary of State's office and may now default to the town attorney to get the answer.
I would suggest the town attorney would be a good place to go.
So does anybody, I mean, I thank you for the handouts, because while some of them are in some cases, a couple of them are duplicates of a couple of things we had, this orange one has information I've not seen before. I think most of us probably would agree that we've not seen it in its complete context like this, especially as Marty's question alluded to. We got one thing here that I'd never heard, that we could change the default budget after the fact. So, were you asking a question, Ken?
Yeah, I just have, I think I'm just trying to find out if, we talked about if we had like one warrant article, or one question was, do you want to vote for $50 to repave a parking lot? And then further down, kind of like if that article fails, we were talking about different articles pertaining to the same thing that could have the same question asked differently on there. Is that something you guys review, and then you would strike it from, like, the same question couldn't be asked 2 times with just different wording? I think we were concerned about people putting a petition. We knew we had to take the petition warrant article, but if the governing body did, a warrant up here and then something down below with kind of close to the same wording, we were just wondering if the DNR picks up on that and then strikes those kind of.
We do not strike them because we don't have authority to change your warrant. What happens if you get 2 articles that are substantially the same, during your deliberative session, the articles could be amended at that point. And even though we don't like to see the wording 2C, an article can be amended to just say 2C. So you would not have
So
2
now
articles.
now you've gone the direction that I thought that another question would come up, because that was a point of controversy that we saw in a surrounding community, a couple of surrounding communities, where issues were brought forward and amended through the deliberative session process to just have the words to see. No,
DRA does not like to see it, but it happens.
and when that happens, the amount's gone, the narrative is gone, everything is gone except the words to see.
Correct.
And it goes on the ballot that way. It's a parliamentary procedure allowable under the RSAs that kills articles.
Right.
So,
Fine.
okay.
How
right,
can you
so-
have a ballot, something that says 2C that you could vote on?
So I put in a petition warrant article, and I say, okay, to see if the town will build a performing arts center, and the cost is $12 million, and I collect the signatures, 25 is all that's required, such a very low bar. I get that on the ballot, it goes to deliberative session. Deliberative session takes all that stuff about Performing Arts Center, $12 million, blah, 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 and just says 2C. And then there's a vote yes, vote no. So you can either vote no, you don't want to see, or yes, you do want to see. But it renders the substance of the article
Null and void.
completely null and void. It just wipes it out,
That,
even though it's a citizen's petition article.
but that's, I mean, that's something that can be done right now, correct?
It's
town
something that.
I mean, what's different about that from
It-
last year?
It's something that, it
couldn't do
could be done, I would expect it would be rare that it might be done at town meeting, but it could be done at deliberative sessions and is done at deliberative sessions all the time. I think this last year, there were a couple of instances of note that made it on and were voted that way. And I think it created an awareness in Londonderry that that is an option that people didn't understand that was even available before. A year ago, I would have told,
Just like-
a year ago, I would have
Stunned.
told you you can't do anything like that. That's ridiculous, but I've since found out you can.
You can.
And DRA wouldn't strike it. Are there other types of,
Could we discuss that issue?
Sure.
Are you on that issue?
Yes, I'm on that issue.
if we're still on that, let's
I'm
keep
still on
going.
that there. To see, and I've been in a couple, went around and seen that happen at the deliberative. I mean, I would think to see at the deliberative, once it got changed, of course, you voted, it's like it's killed, like ITL'd anyways, when it goes to the poll. But the bottom line, on a regular town meeting, you're basically killing it. And then it never gets an opportunity to go forward again anyway. So either way, it's the same. Am I correct?
That's correct, because you could vote to amend the article at a regular town meeting to see.
Yes.
Steve, go ahead.
But at a town meeting, you would not reasonably make a motion to change the wording to C. You would make a motion
To amend.
to amend the article in some manner, because you have your legislative body of 350 people standing behind you that would argue you can't just say that. You just can't say the word, two words, 2C, as an amendment. It's not practical in a town meeting format. It certainly would be possible in a deliberative session, and then it goes into the voting booth, and you're left with those two words, because you don't have a legislative behind you in the voting booth saying, that's a little silly, we shouldn't be doing that. So I think that that's an option.
And you've got a puzzled look on your face, so I'll call you up in just a second. I'm noting your puzzled look. I think you're right, Steve. I think that it's an option at either meeting. I think it would be, to me, highly unlikely that it would be done at the town meeting, because the town meeting is actually a final vote. The deliberative session is not a final vote, and I viewed a couple instances where it happened in a couple of local communities as just item killers, because there was a very vocal minority present. They had, one of the towns actually had a 0 quorum, so there were like 50 people at the
Nobody
meeting,
showed up.
and they just changed it to 2C. That wiped out
And
the
you
rest
could
of the
do
towns.
everything that way. to
Well,
see- to
that's,
see.
that wiped out the rest of the town's ability to be able to have a say. So
Just
now
to
you had
touch,
something.
at the town meeting, you can also amend the language, take it all out, and leave 2C, the same thing.
But
It's
Al, you
legal.
gotta vote at the
the
town
people
meeting,
there
the
will vote,
people
right.
will vote. That's the only difference.
But you can still do it, they'll vote for it right there, right?
So Ann, did you have a question or comment that you wanted to add? Please come up to the mic and name and address for the
Ann
record.
Gaffney, 28 Tocqueville. I was just saying, traditionally here in Londonderry, what we do is amend the dollar amount down to like 0, but it's the same effect, whether it's done at the deliberative session or the town meeting, right?
Same
So,
So,
or am I missing a difference?
no, I don't think you are.
Okay.
Jeannie, could you clarify something, though? If that's a citizen's petition warrant article that's appearing on the deliberative session ballot, we've been told in the past in different contexts, and it may be that this is out of context, that there cannot be an amendment to a citizen's petition. So are you saying a deliberative session could?
Yes.
And that is where it could be. A council or a school board, board of selectmen could not amend a citizen's petition, but the deliberative session could.
That's correct.
So that's the distinction? Okay, that's another enlightening
The
piece of information.
petition
as well.
goes on the warrant as it came in from the petitioner.
Mm-hmm.
At deliberative session, it can be amended to, say they want to raise and appropriate $50,000 to purchase books for the library. It can be amended at the deliberative session to not raise and appropriate $50,000. Or they can amend the amount, or they can amend it to see if the town will.
So that would be an amendment that would then go on, if it passed, that would be an amendment that would then go on the ballot. At town meeting, a citizen's petition could be amended on the floor. So the rules really,
Correct.
it's a matter of timing in the event, and the body.
Just to clarify for everybody, the 2C is only applicable to warrant, petitioned articles?
No,
all.
it's
It's so,
applicable to
any article can be the same thing?
except your operating budget.
Okay, yeah, except the operating budget, okay.
Any other, Chris?
Just to take a step back, because I'm unclear on it. Let's take the fire station scenario again as an example. But if we do something to the effect of, I'd like to bond X amount of money for a fire station in one question, and if that fails, in a second question, we could say, if that fails, we'd like to do it in a one-time expense instead of bonding it. Now, could both of those things appear on a ballot through the deliberative?
Yes. You would make them contingent upon one another.
Right.
We've done that in the past here,
Yeah.
where a common practice for us is we put a bond on for highways, and in 4 years, we put a contingent warrant article on for town meeting. So if the bond failed, we went forward and asked for a vote on the contingent warrant article. This past year, we didn't even do the contingent warrant article. The bond failed, that would have been it.
I have one quick question for it, too.
I'll get to you. I just had one more, my own question first was, in the past, we've been told, and as people, many people up here have sat on budget committees or town councils or school boards. Some of us, there's even actually a couple of current members of at least one of those up here. So, in the past, we've been told that in certain circumstances, the DRA could declare an item illegal that was passed. Could you expand on that a little bit to tell us kind of in what context would the DRA look at something as an illegal warrant article?
Basically, what we call it is disallow. We don't call them
Disallowed.
illegal.
Okay,
but,
disallowed's a nicer term.
It is nicer. Basically, if there's an amendment made from the floor, that is an improper amendment. The example we always use is if someone wants to raise and appropriate money to go into a capital reserve fund. And if it's amended from the floor, to change it from money going into a capital reserve fund to make an expenditure out of that capital reserve fund, that would be disallowed, because you're changing the purpose of that warrant article. If from the floor, you try to add to a capital reserve, excuse me, if you're creating a capital reserve fund, and on the warrant, that's all you do, and from the floor, if you want to name agents, you know, your council or whatever, as agents to expend from that fund, that would be disallowed, because that is changing the purpose of that capital reserve fund.
Okay. So, to kind of broaden that a little bit, if we had a vote at one point to establish a capital reserve fund, and that vote that the voters approved said it would be used for purposes A, B, and C, and the agent is X, that would not be, and then that was passed, that wouldn't be something somebody could later just amend from the floor, because it falls out of, it actually changes the intent of the capital reserve fund to begin with. That's what you're saying?
Pretty much, because the warrant article, as it was stated, say you're making a capital reserve fund for fire station building, you know, to build a fire station. And from the floor, somebody wants to amend it to purchase a fire engine. That would be disallowed. I mean, it would still be fire department, but it's still a different purpose.
Okay. Al?
Just to follow up on what you just said, if I may, when you consider it disallowed, is that, do you look at it before it goes to the polls, or do you look at it after? I mean, or does somebody have to challenge it to you?
What happens is, we get all the documents in, and we try to look at things prior to everything being posted. But of course, when amendments are made at the deliberative session, we don't see that until it goes to the ballot. We very seldom get minutes from deliberative session prior to them being posted on the ballot to be voted on. So to answer your question, we don't make a disallow prior to voting, if it's SB2, excuse me. The way it is now, if you make an amendment at town meeting, that's the only time we're going to see it, is once we get those minutes in. So we won't know if there's
It's after the
something to
vote.
disallow
Okay,
until
just
after
to
town
follow up
meeting.
on something else.
Yep.
Okay, a few minutes, we were talking about the petition part of it also at the town meeting or deliberative in the 2C. Now, like a write-in, and I had this in my mind, asked the Secretary of State, but I never got around to it. Can a sticker campaign, like a write-in, go forward to it to see? If you go with a sticker campaign?
I would defer to Secretary of State on that one.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Any final remarks, Jeannie?
Thank you for inviting me.
I just want one final one for my own thought process. This is going way back to the beginning. If we have a deliberative session and the default budget is changed, and it's changed so dramatically that it will put the governing body feels that the town will go be in a budget crisis, do they have the right to come back and go back to the default budget even though it was changed at the deliberative?
It does not have to be changed at the deliberative. You can go have a separate meeting after the deliberative session has closed and discuss this.
Well, let's say at the deliberative, it's $1 million, just real simple figures. $1 million and the 50 or 100 people that are there say, we want the default operating budget to be 500,000, and because they can actually amend both budgets that are being sent to the board, or they can't touch the default.
Cannot touch the default. They can discuss it and say that they
Okay.
feel it's not correct.
So then the default budget cannot be touched at the deliberative. That moves as is with no amendment powers unless the physical sitting 5 town councilors do that.
Correct. The legislative body can make suggestions, and some of them are quite vocal about it, so.
Okay, so the only thing we can, if they give us a default budget and suggested, what do you guys call it, a recommended budget or something? That's the only one we can go after, is the recommended one. We can't
The
touch.
regular operating budget, is that what you mean?
Yeah, like, on the school side here, we have a recommended and we have the default.
Right.
And at the deliberative session, all we could technically touch was the school board recommended.
Correct.
The default goes as is with no amendments unless the school board makes a decision to amend. And there's no way to change the default, so that goes no matter what.
That's correct. The legislative body cannot make changes.
Okay.
Al, you had one more?
Yeah, to go back on the default here, that default, when the governing body makes that change, can only be in accordance with the RSA if they fail to maybe a one-time expenditure or something that was required to be there by law that didn't get in. Is that correct?
If there is something that's brought up at the deliberative session or prior to the deliberative session that alerts the governing body as to maybe they forgot to put something in, or perhaps they put a one-time expenditure in there that really shouldn't be in there again. That's why it's such a tricky thing to talk about, because it's up to the governing body as to what is a viable expenditure or an appropriation to put in their default budget.
I had one last thing on clarification, follow-up. There's some people have been coming in and they're talking about that SB2 basically takes away their rights, to discuss issues before the town as a whole, and it blocks their ability. Do you see SB2, with your experience going out and about, that SB2 versus town meeting, we're taking away the rights of the voters?
Personally, no, I don't, because what happens is the people who come to town meeting are going to be the ones that come to the deliberative session. Because the ballot will have your election of officers on it, and it's also going to have your bond on it, you may perhaps get a better turnout to vote. The bad thing is you have a small handful of people who come to the deliberative session and make the decisions as to what is going to be on that ballot. So it has good things and it has bad things. I think it allows more people the opportunity to vote, because hopefully they're going to come and vote on people, their elections. Whether or not they're informed voters, I don't know.
I just have, does every time the budget, this is, I mean, I don't, this is an RSA that says it has to have a recommended budget and a default budget on it?
For SB2, you have to have both,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Larry?
I just wanted some clarification about default budget, you know, like when we're voting for it at the ballot box, you just have the numbers there. But when you're at the deliberative session, is it going to be fully broken down so that people can have that ability to look at all the numbers and?
Your default budget is posted the same time you post your warrant and your
wanted to clarify
regular
that.
budget.
Okay.
So, Steve, if I can trouble you for answering this question. When the school presents a default budget and then has the school board's recommended budget, is there typically a presentation of the differences between the default and the school board's recommended budget so that voters might have that as a point of information?
Yeah, not only at the deliberative session, but throughout the entire budget season. So, you know, 24 hours of workshops and hearings that we hold, we will discuss that. The default budget sometimes doesn't come until about halfway through the budget process, because ours is calculated by the finance department. So they will take the time to make sure that, I believe that they think that it's their responsibility, and it would be, if they presented something to your organization in error, although you don't hold any punitive damages or capability to provide punitive damages, they believe that if anyone were to at some point find them in fault, and I've only been on the board for 8 years, so we've gone through those budgets in 8 years, if a citizen were to say, but you were hiding, you know, your union contract increases, they would take that very personally. So I don't see it as something that would really ever happen, and the same integrity exists on the town side, so.
So does that help you with your question?
Yeah, I just,
So
you know.
I think you were
people
going
are
to the
thinking of,
differences between the two,
Looking
correct?
at a default budget and nitpicking, you know, and finding that error, I just wanted to see how they would be able to find that error. I mean, where would they?
On the back page, I think, or somewhere in the default budget, there is a section where it is supposed to break out where the changes occurred, whether it's a plus or minus, and it's supposed to be each line item and pretty much tell you what you took out or what you put in.
It's a regular worksheet. As a matter of fact, the chairman has to sign it before it goes to these guys to agree with it.
So Jeannie, I had one last question, and it goes to DRA's review of the articles. And you said that with the deliberative session, you have an opportunity to review them prior to them going on a ballot.
I could if they were sent to me.
If they were sent to you in time, if there was a timely, you know, submission and all that, I understand that part. And then at town meeting, you only review them after the vote. So my question really goes to, when you're doing this type of review, is the will of the voter taken into consideration at all when you do this review?
Yes.
So if you deemed it as being disallowable, would you look at it and say, oh, but the voters approved it overwhelmingly, so we're gonna let it stand?
It depends if it doesn't break the law or go against the law,
Yeah.
then the will of the voter will probably
Okay.
preside. But if it does go against the law, then it's dead in the water.
Okay. Anything else?
Brian, can I ask, we're gonna go right back to the beginning of our conversation on the political hot button. As a legislator, what recommendation would you make that we take that out of the political hot button and we try to tighten it a little bit more on that there, so the changes?
So we have to review
So
it.
you,
Is that what
right,
you're
you
saying?
have to review it, you got it.
I don't think anybody would be very happy with me if that happened and my name was involved in it.
No, we wouldn't have that. I wouldn't have that.
Cut the tape.
Got the tape?
Yeah.
But would it make sense?
I know all my SB2 municipalities, I asked them to send their default budget in to me, because I figured I may as well get them used to sending it in to me, even though I don't look at it, because I do believe at some point it's going to happen.
So what it would require, Al, is you'd have to increase the DRA staff probably tenfold
Yeah.
and increase taxes to pay for it, so.
She's working here tonight, a few extra hours at night. No.
Yeah. You-
Okay.
Jeannie, I'd like to thank you for coming down to speak with us. It's been valuable, and as I said, sometimes what we're trying to do is rehear information from different representatives so that we can make sure that we have a good understanding of the facts of the matter, and so our report is accurate and complete as it goes up.
Hey, Brian.
Well, at work, I have the most SB2 communities. I think I have 52% of my municipalities are SB2, so they refer to me as the guru.
How many did you say you had again?
52% of my, I have 47, well, I have 105
You
municipalities.
have 105 communities.
So 52% of those are SB2, and it's growing every year. But I also have the coast. My other advisors have the North Country or West or East or something.
Well, I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hey, Brian. Anyone out here, do they have any questions, I mean, that they would want from her or on the public? Just before she goes? Is there-
Anyone is welcome to call me. I work 7:30 to 3:30 most of the time, and my number's 271-8236. And I have voicemail, I have email, and I get back to you.
I keep
Can you make
DRAs
sure
running
you
my
have the
cell
correct
phone.
spelling?
Oh, great. I mean, that's good.
Jeannie, can I just get the proper spelling of your first and last name, too?
First name is Jeane, last name is Sams, Samms.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
So that's,
Thank you.
and thank you very much. So that's the public session part of our agenda. Next stage is we're going to go into Charter Commission discussion on several items here, but I've noticed that since the meeting start, we've been joined by a couple of other people. If they would like to, at the commission's pleasure, I'll open back up for public comment and let you come up if you have specific commentary you'd like to offer, so. Yeah. You were the first one in, he's got to go last, plus ladies first, all that other good
Thank you.
stuff.
So Ann Gaffney, 28 Tocumwell Drive. Thank you, I have tried to come 3 times. Last 2 I showed up and nobody was here. So I'm glad to get here when you're here this time.
Side with you, remember?
That's right, we were the first time, yes. So, I come here, I know you've all experienced these school side changes over the last few years also. And things look very different on the school side than they did when I first arrived in Londonderry. When I first arrived in Londonderry, there was no quorum, or was it no quorum or very low quorum at the deliberative session. And things could be changed, and that was both good and bad. There were some scary parts. You always heard around town, it's really important to go to that deliberative session because they could amend the school budget to 0. And as a teacher, you're worried about that happening. As anyone living in town, frankly, you're worried about that happening. And so everyone came out to the deliberative session. And when I say everyone, I mean a couple hundred people. And we'd pack it into the gym, the old gym, and we'd discuss things and then vote on them, and then it would go to the ballot. And then we had a charter commission change, or a charter change, excuse me, and we instituted the quorum of 500 people needed at the deliberative session to make a change. And now look at the numbers at our deliberative sessions. There are very few people there. Granted, we now have the cable access and maybe there are some people watching at home, but in terms of participation at that deliberative session, we've become very, very low. And we could look at the records, but it's, my guess is about 50 people maybe. That saddens me. And I think that that's precise. Because of the timing, I can't see any other thing that would have impacted that other than the institution of a quorum set so high that people really feel like they can't be involved in that process. I also attend town meeting every year. The only year I missed it was the year we changed the date because of the snowstorm. I had my kid's birthday party already scheduled for that day. Invitations had gone out. Everyone was showing up at my house, you know. Can't really change it. But there, we have a similar situation where we don't have as many people as we'd like participating, but people still come out and participate. And by participate, I mean they ask questions. I mean they offer suggestions. They are a part of the legislative process. I know that at our town council meetings and school board meetings, we don't have as much participation as we'd like at those regular meetings. You know, I know that I have a difficult time getting out to them. I had to try 3 times to come here. But at the town meeting, it's one time and people show up that they can participate in that process. Much more so than we see at the school side. And so what I'm afraid of when I hear this happening, and I know that there's a charter commission to make this change, I am afraid of the town side ending up like the school side. And I desperately don't want to have that happen, because I feel that my voice on the school side is essentially non-existent. That even though I can go to the deliberative session, by the time we get to the deliberative session, they've gone through all of these budgetary meetings, which take place over the course of so many nights, that if I wanted to be involved in the same amount of information, I'd need to be there every single night that they met. And I just can't do that. Much as I would love to do that, I can't do that with my family commitments, my job commitments. And so when there was a deliberative session with a lower quorum, I felt like I had a voice. And I'm afraid now of the town following that same path. If we go to SB2, I beg of you, please keep the quorum low. If there's a quorum, keep it low. Because otherwise, I know that I will have and you know I'm quite vocal on stuff, but I will have a very difficult time participating. And so selfishly, I'm saying keep it low, but also for other people in the community to be involved. You know how hard it is to get here every night for the meetings that you have volunteered to do with the things that you'd rather be doing in your lives or need to do in your lives. That being said, that sort of Al and I have had this conversation, you know, and Al, you talked about the absentee ballots being the real reason in your mind. I'm kind of the way I understand it.
One of them.
To have SB2 over town meeting. And that, I think, is the one issue that begins to sway me in that direction. Although I have to tell you, I'm not there yet. I still want to hold on to town meeting. And here's why. In the town meeting, I feel that we have the purest form of democracy. We have a situation where everyone can have real input by making changes, by offering suggestions, by debating, frankly, with each other in a friendly, you know, open way, but debating the issues and coming to the best conclusion. There have been times when I go to a town meeting where I've changed my mind on something because I didn't understand it before. I thought I did, but it turns out I didn't. And when I just go to the polls, I don't have that same opportunity to really understand the issues, even though I have the best intentions to try to. And even though, you know, I try and make sure that all the back issues of the Londonderry Times that sit on my table because I don't have time to read them get read before I come to those things, I still sometimes don't get it all. And so I think that we need to assume that other people are going to be in the same boat and need that opportunity to talk about it. Just going through my... More often than not, in my experience at town meeting, when something is amended, it is the dollar amount amended, oftentimes at least, the dollar amount is amended down. A lot of the discussions are about dollar amounts being amended down. So frankly, I sort of question if we want checks and balances on our town officials to make sure that the budget is what it should be, then we want the opportunity for that to happen. Sometimes it goes up, but does go down as well. I think, let me just go through my checklist. So bear with me. think that was it. Thanks. Al, yeah.
You have a question?
Hi, Ann, I want to thank you for coming up here, and definitely, that quorum thing is a sad thing with me, because there's only, like I said, about 7 towns in the whole state that even have a quorum, and it's a way of controlling, you know what I mean, where the governing body has more control over the people of the towns.
More power than the
Those
people
more
do,
power-
yeah.
the power's taken away
Yeah.
from the people.
I
Okay,
agree.
especially in today's society, where here in the southern states, we already know the data's out there that many of our residents all work in Boston, they don't get home until late, and then, of course, weekends are with the kids. But anyways, my question is for you, basically, do you think where a deliberative session, a town meeting, if they're on the same sheet of music, which they are, the quorum, if there was no quorum, would that make a difference to you?
It would make a difference to me. I'm still very hesitant to say I'm willing to go with the deliberative session over the other, but, well, let me explain it this way. If we go through and this is put on the ballot that we're gonna move to SB2, and it passes and there's no deliberative session, I'll be ranting at my husband for a month.
There has
I'll
to
be
be
so
a
upset.
Has to be.
Okay, good.
I mean, no
If
quorum.
there's a high quorum. If
Right.
there's a high quorum, I'll be extremely upset.
Right.
My husband won't hear the end of it. He'll, just.
Well, we're not going to
There
recommend
is-
something just to keep that from happening.
Sure.
So you know.
But this is sort of as a way to let you know my feelings about it. If it goes through and there is no quorum, half an hour, I'll be over it. Because but the thing that scares me though about no quorum is that the quorum can change later, and that's what we saw happening with the school side. So the thing that holds me back from saying, yeah, that's really good, is I'm afraid that quorum will be changed later on. And I know it takes a charter change to do that, but we've seen that happen in town. And so I'm gun shy sort of saying that, because we've seen a quorum change on the school side.
Just to follow up on what you just said, if I'm not mistaken, a petition can go forward and a quorum can be put in the town meeting too, and it's through a charter change.
You might be, but
Yeah.
we'd have to ask that question.
Yeah.
Steve, you had your hand, and then Kathy.
And the school board this year proposed Article 5,
Yes.
which was to change the charter from 500 to 350.
Yes.
And that went, the vote on that, 1,384 said yes, and 1,629 said no.
Yeah,
And it was only a change from 500 to 350.
I know.
Why do you think, oh, by the way, 200 people didn't care. They were blank. Why do you think that happened?
Pure guess. But my guess is that many people have not come. Well, I know that many people have not come to the deliberative session and to town meeting. And so my guess is that we tend to like what we know, frankly, as human beings. And without participating in the process, sometimes I think it's hard to see how powerful it can really be. And so if you have never sat through a town meeting, or a school district deliberative session where change can happen, you don't understand, frankly, what you're voting on. And that is, I believe that is part of the voting that you saw. I think another part of it is probably that there are some people who have sat through it and are afraid of what may happen when it's opened up to the voters, in sort of with that more freedom. Which I think is how we got the quorum in the first place.
I won't ask how you voted, because that was behind the curtain, but based on your testimony, it sounds like you would have rather had it lower.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Kathy?
And you're saying that you don't want any quorum. So let me get back to what you were saying on the school side. Teachers used to come because they were afraid of what people would do with a zero quorum. Granted, we're not touching the school side, we're only touching the school side,
Yes.
the town side. But if a handful of, let's say, deliberative session, no quorum, and 10 people are in the audience, and they say, I want to cut the operating budget by $5 million, and the default budget is going to raise us $1 million because it's the default budget. That goes to the ballot.
we're gonna find ourselves in a higher scenario. So with that in mind, you still believe it should be a zero quorum, or do you think there should be some number that gets a little bit of you know what, I'm asking you, what do you think is?
Yeah, I still, well, I mean, zero quorum is just the town councilors there, so then that's, not gonna happen. But
No,
let's say one,
Okay.
right? So one person
One
shows up, right?
person shows up and goes crazy. Changes everything, so
Understood.
everything is,
Understood.
right.
Reed will be
Yeah,
there. Reed will be
it's
the
still-
one person.
It's still got to go to a vote, and I believe that I would rather have the risk of that happening, because I believe it's very unlikely, and have that be an encouraging factor, whatever the right words are, to have people participate in their government at the local level, than to have a quorum of even, say, 100, and have people stay away and not participate in their government. And so it's really a matter of who you want to be in control, because in that situation where when we have no quorum, the voters are still in control of that budgetary process. When there is a quorum, it's harder for the voters to be in control and easier for the town councilors to be in control. And so I'd prefer to have it, the sort of default, the easier, more of the control go to the voters at large. And if voters choose not to exercise that right and don't show up, then frankly, we need to do a better job of educating them on why that's possible. Spoken like a true teacher, I guess, but.
Deb?
Well, the question that Kathy had, well, actually what Steve said, I was going to kind of say, but it kind of like teaches people a lesson. Shame on you for not coming. You've learned your lesson, now you need to come. And I hate to say it, but sometimes you have to learn things the hard way before you realize that you need to start going to these meetings. And maybe, I know it would be a disaster, I'd never want to see it happen, but something like that sometimes says to someone, maybe I should have went to that deliberative and said something, or should have turned out to vote, as opposed to just sitting at home going, oh, everybody else will take care of it for me. I don't need to worry.
So I've heard other answers to those questions.
I'm sure you have. Yes.
Other answers are, well, it wasn't enough of a change anyway. They really wanted to change it. Why didn't they bring it down to 50? That's a question, not necessarily a great one or a great observation to make, in my opinion, but that's okay. Another answer that I heard to it was, well, I voted to keep it right where it is because I'm really satisfied with the way things are. And it wasn't a reluctance to change, it was just general satisfaction with the way things are. If people are in general satisfied, they do not usually vote for any sort of change.
Absolutely.
So to put that in the context of the vote of what established this Charter Commission, it was a vote to establish the Charter Commission to study the question. It was not a vote to change the charter.
Understood.
Right? So that's what we're here doing. We're studying the question. And some of us up here have our own personal viewpoints or quasi-informed viewpoints, however you want to term that. But there's myriad answers to a question of, should it be zero quorum? Well, that might prompt people to participate out of fear. I'm not one to really motivate people out of fear to do anything, but that might motivate people to participate out of the fear of what might happen if they don't show up. And I would see the town employee groups or the school employee groups at the given meetings being a large part of those who would react out of fear to make sure that their positions and their livelihoods and the community in general, because I do believe that it's those support services of fire and police and the school teachers and things like that that make this community kind of what it is. We have an attractive school system and a safe community.
Right.
Where else do you want to move, when you're thinking about those decisions? So there's lots of answers to those questions. One thing that keeps coming up from a lot of different people, they forget that this is a representative democracy. And so with checks and balances, you have checks and balances. you can recall council that you have in place now. You don't have to elect them in the first place, right? So all of those things, you can beat them at the dice. There's a lot of different ways, right? So there's a lot of different ways that those checks and balances are part of the system. We don't have direct democracy on a lot of issues because a lot of people don't have the time it spends to study them, to really be informed. And then you have people who say, well, gee, you go to town meetings so that you can be informed, yet a lot of people come forward and tell me that I don't need to go to town meeting to be informed. I read the newspaper, I read the letters, I read the blogs, I watch the meetings. Why can't I just go on Tuesday and vote? I'm informed. I don't need to hear any more debate. So there's lots of answers to all those different kinds of questions. I think everybody ought to remain aware of the fact, lots of answers. Most of them are just opinions. None of them are actually facts. Right? There's nothing that's taken any of this over from a study of motivational reasons. Based, our good friend C.C. Mitchell could tell us how we could do that kind of study based on pure statistical analysis and
If it were
create
a
the right
quantitative study rather than a qualitative study, yes.
and create the right quantitative pool to get us an answer to all these things. They're still just opinions. So that was my comment to all these other kind of comments going on. And Al, I might have prompted you to say something
You
else.
sure did, because I take notes as I'm listening here. And I can tell you, as somebody that's knocked on many doors in this town, that told that I come to this town for the school. Teachers like yourself, that are good teachers that make a difference in their kids' lives. Look at what happens here come June. Right around town, look at all the for sale signs. Graduation's done, they're packing up, they're getting out of town. The bottom line is they don't want no changes in the school because we have one of the best bands in the country. Nobody wants to change it. And I've knocked on hundreds and hundreds of doors throughout our town and in the town of Auburn. Now, when they say fair of the ballot, okay, like it was said, we took care of that because a lot of the seniors did not want to come here because of the past. They felt funny putting their hand up. So I came in for the last 3-4 years with the secret ballot. That way it drew in more people. But let's be honest here. Would you believe that when we had, let's say the last few years, contracts, union contracts, do you remember here, I'll use last year, for example, I think 305 people showed up. I think after the second and last contract was voted, 40, 50 get up and walked out. 305 people controlled the town, okay, that had the time to make it there, and many of them there were special interests that could happen on the town side. I've been seeing it every year, just like on the school side. The only thing is the school side is protected, 500 quorum. I believe that, like you said, and hit it right on the money, and maybe I'm wrong, you might have changed your mind. After you, deliberative session, made that vote, you've got, 30 days to say, wow, the whole town now, maybe I made a mistake. In that vote, everybody in the town has a say. Would you agree?
I agree that everyone in town has the opportunity to have a say at a vote, absolutely. And because every registered voter has the opportunity to have a say. I would agree that every registered voter who is not sent away due to things beyond their control, such as if they're serving in the armed forces, for example, has the opportunity to come to town meeting as well. So that population that we are excluding from, frankly, their right to vote, for lack of a better term, are people who are sent away due to circumstances beyond their control. So I do agree with you there. I also know that, yes, you're right. There are some people who come for specific interests. You bring up the union contract as an example. The other example was the change in how the, what's it called? The fund where the money came in and it was used for the
Fire station.
Change of use.
Environmental
Change of use. for
impact
the-
survey.
Right, the change of use fees for the land, for open
Yes.
space.
Yes, thank you. And so, that was a big thing that where people, not only did people, so it's not only that people left after the union contract, people showed up in time for that, right? So you're absolutely right that there's some turnover as people are more interested in certain topics. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. because it means that they're making sure to come and exercise their right to vote on something that they care about. So I don't think it's a bad thing that they come and go. Do I wish they stayed for the whole meeting? Absolutely, because I think everything's important, whether or not it's, my teacher's contract, or on a town side it would be something else, but or all of the issues. I believe that all of those issues are important, and and do I think everyone else should think like I do? You're like, yeah, but that's my opinion, right? And you're right, Brian, this is all opinion. But all that you guys have to make a decision on is opinion.
Mhm.
There is no factual information in the, aside from how it runs, there really isn't any fact. So, yes, you've heard, I came here today to share my opinion.
Well, that's why we have these meetings. That's why they're public. We actually will be talking about scheduling a final public hearing before we actually take our vote.
Sure.
And those kinds of things for later on. We'll talk about those later. Steve, you had another comment?
I don't think we're going to have too many opportunities to ask the public questions. Frankly, nobody's approached me at all on this item.
Neither.
Not a single person outside of this room.
Mm-hmm.
And very few have come to this room.
Mm-hmm.
So something that's always troubled me about the school district budget and our charter form of government, which is very similar to SB2,
Yeah.
is that the voter gets presented two choices. And it would be the same by the DRE's declaration. It would be the same if we were to switch to a SB2 form of government in the town.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that situation? I'm looking at last year's vote. We had about 2,700 people that voted for the school board budget, which was about $400,000 less than the default budget. And 300 people voted for the default budget, so they wanted to spend $400,000 more, I guess, or they just wanted to vote against the school board. But
That's
in the traditional budgetary town meeting, we have infinite selections for a budget, where in an SB2, we'll have 2 selections. Can you address your feelings on that?
Sure, absolutely. I believe more choice is better. So being able to have those infinite solutions, I think, is a positive thing. And at the meeting, that's where you sort of go back and forth about somebody's going to amend it this way and take $200,000 off. Oh, but no, we didn't take into account the 5% of this, that, and the other thing, so we're going to amend it back up to this amount. And we do that a lot at town meeting. And I think that's a good thing, because we negotiate through basically the rationales for all of it. And sometimes we have a rationale of, gee, I just want to cut it 5% no matter what. And then when that comes up in recent years, those sorts of things haven't passed. But the things that do are when somebody says, I want to cut it this amount because of this reason. And, then they have a rationale for it. And the body often then, they at least listen to that rationale and then debates whether that rationale is something that they agree with. And so having the opportunity to do that, I think, is really important. In the alternative case where we are an SB2 town, you mentioned that very few people have come to this room to talk to the Charter Commission about this. I must admit I do not go to town meetings normally, but I think I am not in the minority there. I bet that you have very
You mean
low
town
attendance.
council?
Town
Town
council
meetings.
meetings, excuse
Because
me.
you
Town
always go
council
to, I
meetings.
see it every
Yes,
town meeting.
excuse me.
But she's probably sitting at home in front of the TV watching.
And I must admit, Al, I'm
He
not,
runs.
even though I would love to be, but life sometimes gets in the way. And I think that's why we don't see more people in the audience here. Life gets in our way. And if we become an SB town, I expect that that trend will continue. And so we'll have less participation into those 2 choices. And that's one of the downfalls, I think, of those 2 choices, is that we get just the participation of people who can come to the meetings over and over again.
If I can just ask one more question. Again, your opinions,
Absolutely.
and it's great to get them. And I think I'll ask similar questions as more people come. We have, since I've been on the board, because that's my most burned-in, school board, that's my most burned-in memory,
Absolutely.
we've never had a union vote that's gone to the polls that has lost. Every single one that we've presented has won.
To my knowledge also.
Why do you think that is?
I believe that people move to this town because they value the schools, and they like what the schools provide for their families and for their children. And we have a very good reputation, and I think that they want to make sure that continues.
You don't think it's a procedural issue that they're in the voting booth versus in an open room scared, like Al said?
No, I think that if they were in the open room scared, I think those contracts would still pass. I don't think that would change the outcome. If anything, I think they may be scared to say no. I mean, we'd want a secret ballot so that people would feel like if they didn't want to spend the money, the teachers wouldn't. I mean, no teacher would do this, but the perception might be that, oh, geez,
You wouldn't
there's
fail
child's
my kid
teacher
just
there.
because you
Right.
saw me vote against your
Exactly.
contract? Oh, come on.
Exactly. Don't worry, Brian.
They're all gone.
That was,
Kathy?
I have, I guess, a question. With the deliberative and everything the way it is, and the lack of participation, and maybe you can say it to the quorum or some, but we're saying that people are comfortable with the schools, and that's kind of why the vote goes the way it does. And the object of the school is to educate our children, whereas on the town side, you've got police, fire, roads, many, many different branches. Why do you think people at town meeting are so dissatisfied, because it is so many different branches, and that's why they're vocal? Is that why you think people get more into the amending situation, because there is just so many branches and one person has a beef about one portion versus another? And if we went to SB2 and if we went to a deliberative session, would that stifle that? Would it make it, your opinion, would you think that discourse would continue? Do you think it would end? Do you think it would people would just be grabbing at certain areas to try to, and then it goes to the ballot and nobody is really aware of, I'm just trying to find out, because it's not just gonna be me that, we're all making the decision, but it's really the general public that we need to hear from, because
Sure.
we can keep talking and talking, but.
For the first part of your question, Kathy, it was sort of about how people will sort of cut this place and that place, and why that might happen. And my guess is that happens because people don't understand how much they really get from the town for those taxes, because the town provides a lot of services, frankly, for a relatively low cost, certainly much less than it would cost me to go out and get those services on my own. If I had to hire a private trash pickup, for example, it would cost me a lot more than it would cost me in what I pay in taxes.
Yeah, but you get more than one can.
That's true, but I don't fill my one can.
You have more than one.
Well, let's get off the trash subject.
It's really full up.
You have to throw my kid.
So I think there's some misunderstanding there of sort of what we get for those dollars, or how much we get for those dollars.
Steve, I don't know if you want me to admonish her for striking a fellow commission member, but that'll take a motion of the entire board.
Sergeant.
The second part of your question, Kathy, is how I think people might react at the polls, given that there's this sort of discussion happening at town meeting. I really have no idea.
Well, because what we do at town meeting, what we end up with town meeting and all voting for, now is going to go to another body to vote again.
Right.
If we do a deliberative session with zero quorum, because it's basically what could possibly happen again.
So you're saying whatever is approved at town meeting and at deliberative session, excuse me, and ends up going to the ballot, how I feel that will proceed?
Yes. Because at that point, there's no change for change, I mean.
Up or
I-
down,
It's
Yeah.
exactly
Well,
like
I-
the school.
fault or the other.
I think
Exactly like
that
the school.
wouldn't.
Right.
So would it be different now? So your real question is it different than if we kept?
See,
Would the
that's
outcome
what
be
I'm trying to
different? Is
find
that what you're
out.
wondering? Would the
Right,
outcome be different
then-
overall?
Right, I'm trying to find out what your opinion is, that if we take what we do in town meeting and we put it at the polls, will it, because that's what my understanding, that's what a deliberative would give us the same ability to do, it's town meeting before it goes to the vote, right?
So what we're doing then, the
If
difference
we have no
then-
quorum.
Right, so the difference then is what is the fact that it goes to the polls afterwards.
Right.
And so you're wondering how I think the poll outcome might differ from what is decided at the deliberative session.
Like, if a deliberative session, we vote down a union contract, and it goes to the polls, and we get overridden,
Well, if it votes down, though, at the deliberative session, then
or
it goes to the
could that
ballot
happen?
as it not happen,
I mean,
like it's been
that's- I'm just
amended
wondering
on
if
the
that could
ballot,
happen.
right?
I don't think so on a contract.
On a contract, it couldn't happen.
It could be amended to say 2C.
Yeah.
You couldn't amend it, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak out, but you couldn't amend it because it couldn't be re-ratified by the bargaining unit.
Okay, no, I'm not talking about amending it, though. What happens if, okay, it would have to be, yeah, but what happens
So-
at
so
the
that's a
deliberative
question that we
session,
can-
we made a
Yes,
amendment not
That's a
to move
question
it
that
to the
we can
ballot,
clarify.
right?
That's a question we should clarify because
because of the contrast.
Jeannie, who was here a minute ago, said that the only one that could not be amended to the words 2C was the operating budget.
Right, she did not say anything about
So from her
outline.
answer, at this point,
Susan Hickey
I would
did.
say you could amend to say on a contract 2C. Collective bargaining agreement, blah, blah, blah.
But I was
2C.
saying, what happens if we voted it down
But I think we
at a
need to get that,
deliberative?
we need to get a definitive answer.
Like said, we didn't want it.
They will continue with the evergreen or with the laws of the land, and they will continue to get their raises and everything else until we repeal that evergreen clause.
Right.
If it has been voted in since Evergreen was implemented.
That's a different
So-
discussion.
Right.
Let's cut that off. There's a couple of people over here that have comments or questions. So before you go, Chris, had her hand up.
I just wanted to get your opinion on, I'm hearing, we have two budgets. We can do all kinds of things at town council, but when we go to the deliberative session and then vote, we only have two choices. So, in your opinion, if you can go to a deliberative session, say our operating budget is 25 million, do you believe at that deliberative session that you have the option to say, I would like to take $1 million off that budget and have it go to vote?
Yes.
So in effect, we could do that. And then somebody could amend, or at the end of the day, there could be 3 or 4 amendments to that budget that now is going to go, the final one is going to go to the town
Yep.
for everyone to vote on. So what's really the difference?
Between that and the town meeting style, is that the people who vote on it afterwards weren't privy to the conversations necessarily. They weren't there participating in that. They may have watched it on television, but they certainly weren't there participating in it. So the other difference is that at a deliberative session, things are presented, my only experience with this is from the school side. I haven't lived in another place where this happened. When the school district makes their budgets, they make the default, they make the operating budget, and they go through months of processing the budget, as the town side does as well. But then they come to the deliberative session with these budgets that it's kind of too late to change. Now, if we have no quorum and on the town side we can still change it, then like I said, I feel so much better about that, because then we can have that discussion. So you're asking then,
So your
why
will is
not
heard,
go with it?
basically.
In terms of the infinite choices, there is no difference. For other reasons, I think there is a difference, and that's because then we are, when we stick with town meeting instead of the deliberative session, we are keeping more power in the hands of the voters, and we are participating in that purest form of democracy. And that I really value.
Okay.
Deb?
Well, this is off track now, but when Susan and Dave were here talking about this, they did say that the contracts couldn't be touched.
Okay, so at each point where we've asked a question like that of local representation, we've also pretty much established through this other list of questions that we were going to confirm those answers outside. And so far, they're batting 1,000.
Right.
Right.
You know, so I just think that we should continue that process to make sure that we leave no stone unturned.
I thought it was one of our questions originally. and
It was
they
of them, I just was gonna look to see if it was on the ones that were going back to the attorney, but it was
If
like
you-
13 questions.
I
here,
thought because
14
those were
questions.
negotiated. they
If you
couldn't
look on
be.
page 3 of the orange, They do talk about collective, so I guess what they're saying is if it doesn't, I'm looking at this saying that no matter what happens at the deliberative, it moves forward, and that you can't change the figures, but you can say yes or no, I would think, at the deliberative, if you support it or not. And then if it goes to the ballot, you can do the same thing that we always do on the town meeting floor, which is put in the amendment to say that we could have a special election to read.
It's a special, that's another warrant article that goes in
Right.
authorizing a special meeting.
But
That's,
at the
that's not the
deliberative
same as
session,
amending it to say 2C.
but at I guess the clarification I need is, at the deliberative session, the body that is at the deliberative session has the right to say, yes, we support this, or no, we don't support it. Does that go to the polls with the fact that the deliberatives
That's what we have to clarify.
supported it or not supported it? So when people are reading the warrant article, they could say, at the deliberative session, it was voted down, but
I think that entire area of questioning, and especially in regards to collective bargaining agreements, needs some clarification.
So Brian, the question then on that is, today, the ballot will say recommended by the town council, recommended by the budget committee. Would that be an option where it would be recommended by the deliberative session to be on the ballot?
Is that on your ballot?
No.
no.
Okay.
Because at the quorum issue, Al, so nothing changes.
I like that.
We can,
Well, but you could
we're
put it
supposed to be
on
able to
there.
do whatever we want within a certain window, so that sounds like something that we might.
It's just your discretion.
That's not a big.
Yeah, so that's the other part of this, is that the limitation of what we can actually recommend and put in front of the voters is fairly narrow. Are any of these extra nuances
Allowed.
within that narrow, there's, you know, a narrow charge. So if they are, and we want to discuss them and include them, then we discuss them and include them. If we don't want to include them, then do we make note of them in the report that goes to the council that simply says, we also discussed these issues and elected not to
Support.
proceed or support or even take a vote. We table them, for lack of a better word.
I'm done.
Just a second. Marty, go ahead.
Steve, this question is really for you. I want to try and get this out so people can understand the difference, or what may be the same if we go to deliberative session for the town. On the school side, right now, it's presented a default budget and the recommended budget, right? So at deliberative session, let's say you had the quorum. If someone motioned to cut the budget for a sports program, okay, a specific sports program, okay, and
Water polo.
what's that?
Water polo.
Whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, big or small, but somebody, they make that recommendation and they vote on it. The school board then would, if they voted against it, the recommended budget going forward would be without that specific piece in it?
You know, like the town, it's a bottom line budget, so that would be the decision of the superintendent and then his board of directors.
So then, really what you're doing, we're back to the basic, again, bottom line.
I think
So if a person comes in and says, water polo, you're spending too much on a water polo team, you spend $50,000, and I want to just cut $50,000 from the budget specifically for that. Everybody votes on it. They still could have the water polo team because it's a bottom line budget, right?
Right.
Okay, and it's the same thing would be with us. If it would be the bottom line again, and then it's back to the discretion of the town manager in how and where he spends that money, along with the guidance, obviously, and consent of the council. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Marty, Brian, if I may,
Yeah.
wouldn't they take that money from somewhere else? If the people voted to take that out, they would have to adjust that budget. Now, the default is already there, But they would have to, I would think, and I'd like to get clarification on that.
So I would take it from 25 million to 24 million
To 24 million, and then that million would have to come out of also the default, because if they voted that down, it shouldn't even be in the default.
No, it has, no, it stays in the
I-
default budget.
See,
I would
this
like
is-
to get
this-
clarification on that, because
Okay,
I
we'll
can't
ask
see
that,
that.
we'll ask
because-
that question, but the, you know, a lot of people project that the default budget will always be lower.
Right.
And it won't. It's statistically not always going to be
Right,
lower.
no, it's
Like it
always-
was this
it's
past year.
higher.
It's, some people project that the default budget is always going to be higher, and it won't.
It depends on what.
It statistically can't be, you can't sustain always being lower until you get to some point out here mathematically in a number of years where it has to become higher.
But Al,
But
you
let me
can't
finish,
touch the
please.
default.
Let me finish, please. So, in a sense, the default budget, while right now on the school district side is typically higher, many of the people who say they supported it being passed in the first place, the SB2 at the State House, talked about the default budget as a safety valve. So that in the event that you had a low quorum and you had a rogue group of citizens come in and they passed amendments and they lowered the budget by, you know, $14-15 million, the default budget provides a safety valve. They could come in and they could say, I want to cut the band, I want water polo out of here, I want you to close that gymnasium, I want all the savings represented by that, and I want a $12.5 million cut. And the townspeople wouldn't have had notice, wouldn't have been at the deliberative session, wouldn't have been watching on TV, wouldn't run down and at the last minute save the day, but 30 days later, they're gonna vote it on the ballot, and the safety valve is the default budget. Now, that's another opinion, right? It's a potential, it's a potentiality. But we can get that clarified if you'd like, you know.
The reason why I'm throwing this in here, because if you read the RSA, and matter of fact, Gene clarified it, the governing body can make the change to the default. Now, if it's voted on the town budget, that $1 million, of course, it can even go up, they can come in and put 12 million for an auditorium, and then that budget will be higher than the default. That's already in place, that could happen too.
So, yeah, so to put it that way, a rogue school board could
Right.
come in with a ballot with $12 million in it for an auditorium. The default budget wouldn't contain it.
That's
could
right.
vote.
But what I'm trying to say here, if
It's a
the
safety
voters knocked out that $1 million, then the governing body would have the authority to make the change to the default budget. And it can be challenged through the DRA, as she said, under disallowed.
But, you explain it, Steve, because you live it.
Get to too many different
Am
examples
I,
of what
I
ifs.
mean, wasn't this how she explained that the governing body is the only one that has the authority to change the default?
But someone-
After the deliberative session.
Right. Someone would come to the deliberative session and they would say,
With legitimate reason.
I believe your default budget is wrong because you haven't taken into account the fact that you don't lease your computers anymore. You now expense your computers. So you still left that leasing in your default contract, but you don't lease them anymore, now you buy them. Then that board would have to say, gee, they're right, we missed that one, so we need to adjust our default budget, and they would do so at a future meeting. But you wouldn't adjust the default budget for the will of the voter, because your default budget is based upon your contractual obligations.
So then why, I'm gonna have to, think, I mean,
So,
maybe I'm
so look
missing
at
the boat here.
it, look at it this way.
Because if the $1 million taken out here, the voters took that $1 million out. I would think the will of the people, someone would have to go to the governing body, said, that million is in there improperly because the will of the people voted here. You would have to
No,
correct the
default
default.
is totally
what-
different.
So there's a couple of things at play here. The default budget is typically based on objective criteria.
Right.
Right? The will of the people is a subjective vote. So what the will of the people vote on this year and gets approved becomes next year's default. The voters cannot come in and vote on a default at deliberative session. They can't come in and say, okay, I believe the default should be 62 million instead of 64.5. They could offer opinion about why it might not have been calculated correctly, but there's not a vote to contest it, It's simply the school board or the governing body, the council, if it was SB2 on the council side, would take that opinion under advisement. They'd step away from that meeting, probably directing their respective finance departments and their respective managers to go study it and come back and tell us, is this person's opinion,
Right.
does it have merit?
And if it doesn't, they wouldn't,
And if it doesn't, then
Change
there's
it.
no objective criteria to change it, and they wouldn't change it. That's theoretically how it should work. Marty, you have a,
Yeah, for clarification, default budget,
Bob will get to you if you still.
which
got
is,
something.
it's the same as last year's with certain adjustments required by previous actions of the governing bodies or whatever, okay? So let's use that polo example again, okay, water polo. And let's say it was $50,000. If the school, if it had been in last year's budget, and at the, before you even prepared this budget, you decided you're gonna do away with the polo team, the whole thing, okay? It would still show from last year's budget, would it not?
Great example.
Well, that's what he said.
So would that be where somebody could come in and say,
So let's say the board or the town council decided, we'll use the school board, because use that example. We're gonna get rid of water polo this year. And then the default budget still has water polo in it.
right,
The voters end up passing the default budget for whatever reason, water polo stays.
They might pass it because they want water polo.
So you're
to stay.
saying nobody can go to the governing body?
right, I mean, you never know what's gonna happen, you're right.
Can I ask a question
You
about
keep-
that?
Yeah, you
It's an
can't take,
example
you
that
couldn't
doesn't
take out
attack
water
anybody, 'cause we
polo
don't have a
because it
water
was a
polo team.
previous contract.
So the,
I don't want anybody to think we're
But
gonna
it's a
cancel the
bottom line
band or
budget,
anything
right?
like that.
Yeah,
because
and
of
it's a
some
bottom line budget.
stupid
we are
question.
canceling
So
water
you
polo?
theoretically could still cut the water polo team and use the money
You're the
elsewhere,
coach,
but the
right?
money for it is still there.
And those elected officials probably would do that
Right.
if they wanted to get elected again.
or they could say, water polo, we want the money for something else, and get
Well,
all the
but
water polo
political
people
expediency,
mad at
you
it.
know, if that's why the budget passed, was because somebody said, I don't want you cutting this particular activity, so I'm gonna go out and campaign, and suddenly there's 2,700 voters, and 1,700 of them
I think we
say,
better keep water polo.
I think we're gonna listen to these guys, because obviously we misjudged the will of the community. You know. Or they might keep it and take it out somewhere else, who knows, but
And
that's,
Again, to the
again,
point-
that's a lot
to
of
the
what if,
point,
there's a
you know,
lot
you
of
don't-
what ifs in here, and we're trying
I
to,
just,
Right.
Brian, I have one more question, like what Marty was saying. So if, like, say, a water polo scenario happens, and everybody comes in and they vote for the default budget, which is higher than the recommended budget, next year, the default budget is based off the higher budget because
it's
they,
based off of the
and it just,
budget,
it could
the approved
potentially
budget
just
of the
keep going
preceding
up
year.
and up the default anyways. And you would hope that the recommended, which is the safety thing, but if it was going up for reasons like that, then the default budget would not be based on that as a one-time thing because it's considered part of the operating budget, so it would continue to keep going up,
The money
correct?
But then wouldn't I, as like a concerned citizen, say, hey, why is the water polo budget still in there?
But it got voted approved.
Well, the point is this, by the time you see the next budget, water polo may not be in there. The money's still there.
Right, so that
you
adds,
as a concerned
Right? Am I-
citizen who
am I
knows
asking
that
the
the
right-
deliberative
No, you're
session
right,
voted
you're
to
right.
get rid of it, and you found out through reading the local media coverage that the water polo team was still practicing and playing and renting out arenas and all this kind of stuff.
That's correct.
You as a concerned citizen might come in and say, hey, we voted that down at deliberative session. And then it would be the board who sits
Right.
in whatever seats, it would be up to them to answer your question and your.
yeah, but if, right, but the, okay.
And that happens now.
Right.
There are things that people come up and they say, we voted it down, and yet they're still there. Because sometimes what you voted down wasn't what you think you voted down. It's not always kind of crystal clear at times.
And
The
that's part of,
peculiarity of the system, the bottom line budget, the ability to manage at the bottom line, all those other things that unless you specifically change the way the town or the school district governs in those arenas, you have no control.
in that example we just used with the water polo, if the $50,000 was there in that budget, even though they canceled the team,
Yeah.
water polo, it doesn't show $50,000 for that, but it's in the budget, it stays in the default budget, and then the following year, it's there again, okay? It doesn't say water polo, but it's
just
the
there.
default budget. You're back to it, keeping that in there.
It's bottom line. Distributes the way you want to distribute it. When we go to vote, we're only ever really actually voting on the bottom
Bottom
line.
line.
And amendments to the bottom line.
How many times we've said that?
Yeah. And when you have it where it happens now, the way it happens, it doesn't really matter whether it's a board of selectmen and they actually make every spending decision without a town manager administering it. The administrator just goes and does it. In our form of government, we pass a budget and the manager goes and executes the budget. He doesn't come back to the council for every little decision. He goes and administers the budget. He makes the decisions. He makes the calls. He doesn't bring, my guess, he doesn't bring 95% of them to the council's attention. He just goes and does his job. Another form of government would change that to where everything came through here. And everybody here would be the 5 or 7, or I think it can go up to 9 people, would be the accountable group that you'd come in and question and beat on every year. Elect, throw them out, recall them, whatever you want to do. That's, I mean, it's the system that we're in.
Reed, you gotta let Nappy go. He's been waiting longer than you.
Happy to, thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Brought up some good stuff.
It was just nice to talk to some,
Try to keep it out of the realm of debate
With an
and actually
opinion.
discussion. So Bob, he's already spoken.
He always likes to go last.
We can send you the tape if you'd like, Bob. Yeah.
All right, just Bob McCall, the town of 14 Covey Drive. Couple of questions. For Mr. Young, school board side, when did we start SB2? Remember what year it was?
Oh, it was before I was on the board. I think at this point it would be 12 years ago.
About 12 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Charter was passed for it in 96, I think.
The Foley, yeah, that one, yep. But I thought it was a couple years
We've
after
got it
that.
in our folder.
I thought it was a couple years after that.
We
when
have a
got
copy
into
of it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
no, wasn't it always the quorum? No,
Anyways.
there wasn't.
Anyway,
Came
okay.
after.
Guys, let's not turn this into a debate. He asked the question, we'll look up an answer.
If you could. In the 12 years, let's say, in the budgets that we've had, each time we voted on these budgets, was the smallest number always the number that got picked? Or a majority of the time, shall I say?
I could only realistically indicate in the last 8 years, 7 of those years, it was the smallest number.
Okay,
8 years ago, the number was $42,000 more that was selected, and that's because that included the custodian at the library.
right.
So other than that year, it's been 8 years, it's always been selected lower. Sometimes it's been $50,000, sometimes it's been, I think it was as high as $800,000. one year.
Right.
And $1
It's usually the lowest number.
But,
was a difference.
but our enrollment in the district has been flat or declining.
Right.
So, and there's been cost savings put in place. So I'm not going to say it's easy to keep it lower, but there are dynamic organizational reasons
Right.
why it hasn't been higher.
Right. With the flat enrollment and whatnot, I mean, as far as the school budget goes, okay? The town, on the other hand, is grown a little bit. We've added police officers, we're doing a fire station, and the highway department is getting bonds and whatnot. My question, I think, right now would be this. Go back 12 years, when SB2 started in the school, if that's what it was. What percentage of the entire tax budget, both town and school, was the school side, and what was the town side? What were the percentages of whatever that number was? If it was $80 million, what was the school percentage? What was the town percentage? Follow it through the 12 years. And I would like to know what it is up till now. And I would like to know if the school is higher, percentage-wise, today than it was 12 years ago, as far as the town goes. And the only thing that changed was us having the ability to sit in that gym and make drastic changes, which we can still do on the town side and happened $250,000 this year. That can happen. So that's a question I'd like answered, and I know you don't have the numbers in front of you, but if you could look at them.
Just to address that, Brian, I did ask both Sue and Peter for that this year when I was preparing my mind for our budgets for the last 5 years. So.
I think there is a 5, maybe even a 6-year look back. I don't think anybody's ever asked to look 12.
You may have to go into the annual reports of both forms of government, but it would be there, and I think that's a great question. It'd
If
be
you
a
could
great
find
graph to
out,
look at.
there's a trend. What worries me about SB2, and Ann covered it, and you guys talked about it quite a bit, all right? And this quorum thing, and I came in a little late on the quorum thing, and I know it's 500 and 350 and all that stuff with the school, but I know it's 500, and that's a lot of people. And it certainly wasn't a lot of people in the 90s when we had 2,500 people in the school, in the school. But it's 500. If you go with no quorum, or a low quorum, 50 people, 60 people, whatever it may be, here's my concern. And right now, 300 people will show up at town meeting. And if somebody comes in with a crazy idea or an off-the-wall scheme, 300 people, 60 of them may be those crazy people, and 240 people say, no, we're not going to do that. We're a little bit more intelligent than that. With the SB2, you may find your numbers getting lower and lower at town meeting because you will be voting for the lowest number. Year after year after year, the lowest number will be chosen. I think you'll see that over 12 years. It's probably 10 with the lowest number. Because when people go to the ballot, they didn't watch you. They didn't read the paper. The majority of them are looking for the lowest number.
So I think, Bob, to interrupt you a little bit,
Go ahead.
there's statistical studies done by I think it's, what's it called, the Center for New Hampshire Politics, and that have looked at the first 5 years of SB2.
Right.
And they've drawn their own conclusions based on the studies, and it's been a while since I looked at them. But at the time where I was really looking at them, the information that I was getting was that on average across the state, there was no appreciable change in spending habits of any given community based on whether or not they were SB2 or town meeting.
Mm-hmm.
That towns that went from one town meeting type to SB2 showed no appreciable increase or decrease. Towns that went the other way, of which there are fewer, showed no appreciable increase or decrease from those types of activities. The things that people wanted to pass still passed. The things that people wanted to fail still failed, typically. And just as in our community, there's been a number of times where something failed. It failed because it wasn't the right model or the right price, and then it passed later on when it was re-engineered into something more affordable. So one of the original high school expansion projects at $34 million, it never got through. Was it ever going to get through? Not really, because not enough people supported it, and that's what it really came down to. So we could go look up this data and provide it. The why behind it doesn't come clear in those studies that were done.
I think
Come clear
percentages.
here. It wouldn't come clear here. All it would be a percentage assessment of 12 years of history of how much of the budget was school, how much of it was town.
Right. Right, but it would show, where the money's coming from greater than the other spot. In other words, if the school board was getting 65% of the money in
12 years ago.
1998, all right, 65%, and when the town was getting 35%, and that is now gone to 70-30, that's a 5% difference
Mhm.
with SB2.
Is it attributed to SB2? See, you want to draw the correlation between a possible, to say theoretically, you're correct, it's an increase of 5%.
Right.
Right? You want to draw the correlation that is directly attributed to the charter change in the school district that took it to SB2.
What would it be attributed to?
Voter will.
No,
The airport,
superintendent, got a new superintendent during that
It could be,
timeframe.
it could be the town manager that was changed in that time frame. It could be the school district superintendent was changed. It could be, No Child Left Behind. It could be the Claremont decisions. There's just, pick it. There's a number of different items out there. So to simply correlate the change as directly attributed to SB2, I don't think holds water.
I'd like to still see the numbers.
I think it'd be an interesting number.
Yeah, I do too, because the enrollment's down and we have spent things
Yeah,
as a town.
If
But-
somebody has the time to do it, I'd like them to tie every one of those years as to what happened. What did we do? Well, we built a gymnasium, and then a couple of years later, we built a police station, a town hall, and, $4 million for an open space trust fund.
I think this data's
So there's-
already out there from either Nate or from up at the state education. I remember seeing it in one of the
Yeah, but
meetings I was at.
I just don't think it ever went like that.
Everything was bonded anyways. But anyways,
Too
what
many
I'm getting at is we were talking about quorum.
Yep.
Without a certain number, at least enough people to overcome what can be done at town meeting. Here's a question for you, going back to what you were talking about. You can amend the final number down, all right, the budget number down. Let's assume you have a default budget, let's take numbers. Let's say you have a default budget of $40 million, and you have a budget of $42 million, okay?
Mhm.
What would stop, with no quorum, what would stop 30 people? And again, and I'm getting to the point where, over the years, less and less people are coming, because they haven't had to come, the lowest number's getting voted in. So they stop coming at the 300 amount. And a group of people come in who want conservation land or an auditorium or something like that.
Yeah.
And they amend the budget down $12 million. So now, instead of a $42 million budget, you've got a $30 million budget and a $40 million default. Can they then say, all right, now that we've got a $30 million budget, we would like $5 million to build something? And it has to be expressly for that. Now it's a $35 million budget and a $42 million, or a $40 million default. The $35 million is going to pass.
You can do that
So,
now.
so we somewhat had that discussion already tonight, a little bit, and we also had this discussion on the floor of town meeting a couple of years ago with the fire station
Right.
article. If that article had passed, if I'm correct in my memory of that, the ruling on the floor was it was a bottom line budget. The amount could be added to the budget, and the town could do with the money what they wanted.
That's what I heard earlier too, and I heard that at town meeting also. So it can't be specifically for that, or even a way around that.
So,
Is
so
there a
the
way around it?
The way around it is through properly posted petitioning articles that then specifically appropriate money for a specific purpose.
Right.
If it's just done through a series of amendments to the operating budget, it's just a bottom line budget.
Okay.
That's been kind of the standard guidance that we've followed in the community for a while now.
All right. All right, my main question was that, the percentage thing.
So we'll look at that. I think we have it probably available back 5 to 6 years based on history that I have, so
Okay,
we'll ask the town to take a look at that.
appreciate it.
Steve?
Let me talk about your presumption that with a $5 million difference, the lower number would pass.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I'm going to use a school example only because I know the information. So if we were to look at decreasing the school budget by $5 million, and we went to deliberative session, and 501 people showed up, and they reduced it $5 million, and then that was presented to the voters. We know to reduce the budget $5 million, it would take a number of different items, and I'll just select a few that would equal to $5 million. We would increase the class sizes in the elementary schools to 30 children. We would eliminate co-curricular and extracurricular activities, the sporting programs and the band program.
Right.
That would get us to about that $5 million decrease. If we were to do that, how would the voters vote? Would they then vote for the lowest number?
If you're publicizing it as much as you would have to, probably not, because that's,
So on the same side, we
To
did
do it on the
these-
town side, these guys will know the town business better, but it would mean a loss
By law,
of
would
some.
you have to do that, to say if they went to a default budget?
No,
This
that
is
what,
a-
Steve's
would you
correct,
have-
though. The school board would do exactly what the council has done, right? You would put the scenario together of what the
What you
cut
would
would
have to do,
represent.
right.
And the school board would have to do it right there in the deliberative session. The council has done it,
At budget
in
hearing.
6 years, they've done it 3 times, right? They did 1 year, they did a 5% and a 10% reduction.
Right.
What would the 5% reduction look like? What would the 10% reduction look like? And their documents, their public documents, you know, I can't, no way could I remember specifically, but it was certainly along the lines of we would have to reduce the police department staffing by 9 in the Uniform Services Division. We would have to reduce by 2 shifts in the fire department. Partially staffed shifts to no staff on the shift, and seek assistance through mutual aid agreements. Thank you. We would have to close the library 1 day a week under the 5% and like 3 days a week under the 10%. So there were a number of cuts like that, that if a dedicated group of interested citizens came to the floor of the meeting and were able to make that cut, that's the consequence of the cut. So if they did that in a town-wide type deliberative session and they voted it, the council would immediately come out and go public, just like the school board would do. Here's what the cuts mean. Here's what's going to happen. If the voters approve them, the voters approve them. We start, the process of issuing layoff notices that would go into effect on July 1st.
Right, and what you say.
And in that
because
case, I would bet people would not vote for the lower number.
Because you understand the way things are, we can make that point. Same with the sports and the band and everything else, because you make that point.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people would say those are scare tactics.
Yeah.
And vote for the lower number.
Yeah, but, and here's the...
Be enough, I don't know.
I think that would be my prediction is that a lot of people would vote for the lower number, not a majority. I think the same people who would consistently do vote against free lunches.
Yes.
It'd be that group of people. They'd look to gift horse in the mouth and say no.
Or somebody doesn't have children in school and think that
They
they should be
don't have
paying
to
for
be
this.
paying
for it.
But see, that's the thing, and on the school side, I think there's a larger group of people who don't have kids in school, and I hear that, those people are gonna vote against school budgets. Well, no, they actually vote for property, sustained property values in a lot of cases. On the school side, that's one kind of demographic that you gotta look at. On the town side, all the things that we would cut affect every demographic in town. Talk about the discussions to close the public library 1 or 2 days a week. I mean,
Oh, I understand, no.
and it's deemed on the town side as not being a necessity, a necessary service. So if it came up against what are we going to cut, police, fire, or library, we're going to cut the library.
And over the years, where have we made these arguments?
The floor of town meeting, and in these council chambers during the budget workshop process, where we reviewed, 3 times in my 6 years up here, we reviewed documents that covered those cuts.
And where are they effective most? At town meeting.
I'm waiting for you to get done, that's why we had this conversation. But if I may, the bottom line is, you can do the same thing on the town, you can do the deliberative session. The end result, what goes on at the deliberative session, with all the changes from 40 to 30 to 35 to 55, the final vote, all the voters vote.
But here's the difference. So, to your analysis, that we ended up, so we cut the budget, whether it be town or school, $5 million, and the voters came out and said, oh my God, you better not cut that. So they voted for the higher number. And here's the problem. That higher number, originally given by the town council to the school board, was actually $1 million less than the amended number that was done at deliberative session, and that is different from town meeting.
Right.
Because you go to the polls with those 2 selections.
That's what you got.
And I have actually, in the years that we have presented a lower number, I have been concerned that
lately.
that if we go to the higher number, that, if we went too low, if we brought it down too low in affected services, they're gonna go to the higher number.
Because
So would I rather keep it $400,000 below and know that I'll pass the lower number? Or would I rather keep it $5 million below and know the higher number will pass?
Exactly.
So, and that's the problem with the deliberative session, is it's not the same as town meeting.
Right.
But
Right.
If I may here, I'm gonna go back to RSA 40:14, and this is on one's interpretation here, but it's here in black and white on the changes to the default in the governing body, if something is voted down or voting up. Because it says the default budget shall be disclosed at the first budget hearing held pursuant to RSA 32:5, and I'm gonna go for it, RSA 197. Then it says the governing body, unless the provisions of RSA 40:14 are adopted, shall complete a default budget from created by the Department of Revenue Administration, demonstrate, which it tells you how the default budget amount was calculated. Now, the form and associate calculations shall, at a minimum, include the following. Number one, appropriations contained in the previous year operation budget. We know that. Reductions and increases to the previous year's operating budget. So what is, and my interpretation of that is that default budget by the governing body can be changed in accordance to the way the vote went on the other budget. Now, then it goes number three, one-time expenditures, which we're already well aware of that. Now, my interpretation's why we need clarification. Here it is in black and white. If we read number two, reductions and increases of previous year operating budget, because there's certain things in that previous year got paid off. There's certain things that we can't
But
carry
that's
over
already
again.
figured in now.
Previous year.
That's already, it's previous year.
Right,
It's
but the-
not
but-
what's voted on
But
the
if you go
deliberative.
by,
The thing is that the reductions and increases, the body who determines,
is the governing body.
and that's,
Right.
in this case, in our school district, it's the school board.
Right.
In our current form of government on the town side, if we go to SB2, it would be the town council who makes the
And the
determination.
reason why I brought this up is because my question would be to ask on the league, or whoever would answer this here, was by number two under RSA 4014, does that identify if you vote something out of the regular budget, does that automatically, the governing body have the authority to take it out of that budget, default, because of number two within the RSA 40?
They have the authority. I would say that they have the authority to take it out, but they are also, it's an optional choice on their part. They
Right.
don't have to.
Which could be challenged.
But Brian, if they could do that, then why do we have a default and a recommended? They would be the same number.
That's right,
So
yeah.
there's gotta be some reasoning
there is
why.
reasoning why.
Why, if the school board's cutting the default operating budget down by 400,000 or moving it up by 400,000, there's gotta be some reason why they can't touch the default budget, because it's gotta be, the key
because
word
it's-
is based on the previous year, so you've
Because it's
gotta use
supposed to
those
be objective
figures.
criteria, so that if you went in and you said, okay, last year my townspeople approved a budget of 50 million. I have 3 contracts here which show me increasing. The value of those increases is $1 million, so now I'm at 51. There were 2 other things that were passed, and I'm at 52, right? There was something that was cut, and now I'm at 51 again.
Right.
And you do whatever the puts and takes are from what the voters approved. And, I mean, the better way to look at it is actually bring the form in here and look at the form.
Right.
So we'll do that for the next meeting.
mean, if
When
we
when you see the form, it becomes kind
I
of
think-
clear that this is what's being done
I think to have Peter address us again on
with the
that.
form in hand.
Yeah, because he's the guy that fills it out, and
I mean, Al,
could help with
I know what you're trying to say, but I think there's a logical reason why you have to have a default budget and there's a recommended budget.
If I may add to
Can't
what
be
you
the
just
same.
said, rather than think, could be, might be, maybe, of course, I'm a trust but verify type of guy, that's why I read the law. That's why it's very important for us to get some type of interpretation of the law, to break, you know what I mean, on what I see on line number 2.
I just.
Right, you hit it right on the
To
money.
differ
Look at
with
the
you a little
form.
bit, I think if you had the form in front of
Right,
you,
well,
it
it might
becomes
show it.
easier for
Yeah,
Peter to
I
explain it.
agree.
And Peter's responses were pretty much validated by Ms. Sams, who was in here, talking about the DRA would not subjectively evaluate the form, that the form is objectively evaluated and approved by the local governing body. If local governing body was the town meeting, which it can be in some states, or some municipalities in New Hampshire, then the local governing body would have to approve the form and have to say, we vote that this is the default budget.
I just,
So I think yes, it's interpretation, but I think we have the interpretation. We could ask again, I think we'll get the same answer. I think if we put the form in front of everybody here, because that was a question that came up, and an interested citizen actually sent me a copy of last year's forms. Said, here, this is what they look like. And it's kind of clear from that point when you see it. You can see the way they calculated. So in the town side, We've asked Dave in the past for what looks like a default budget, but there was no specific criteria for it in our government structure. But we've asked him to bring back a default budget for comparison purposes.
Right.
And so the puts and takes are all right there. It doesn't include the one-time things, just like we've heard about.
Right.
So,
And sometimes the default was higher well, most of the time it was because of contracts and things like that. But usually but we did ask for the default, and then we asked for a 1% decrease and a 2% decrease, and just a flat, too.
on average, over the last several years, we've beaten the default budget on the town side. We've also beaten what would have been a spending cap if anybody had ever come through with
And
the
the school
spending
has
cap
done the same
legislation. We've
thing.
beaten it on both sides
I
of the
mean,
house.
we're lucky, we've
For the
had
last,
good
5
boards.
years at least.
I mean, we've been,
There hasn't been growth
Are you able to print
Right.
anything here? If I was to print a
No,
section?
there's no
I
printers
don't think there's a.
around here
I don't
connected.
think there's a printer interface.
I want to get clarification of Marvin Concord, that's why I'm not taking.
So,
That was my question. Just one other thing, no matter,
discussion we had on one question here. So.
yeah, whatever you come up with, I think it's important to set it up with the understanding that the way the town is changing, where we're going, the amount of people involved in what's going on in town, and where we may be heading to, if there's any way of setting something up while you do what you're doing to make the next transition a little smoother. That might be something you might want to discuss as a group. Thank you.
How do you feel that it's, you're saying that as a pretty blanket statement, just how do you feel that it's,
The way the town's going,
where the town's going, yeah, and,
I think it's a matter of time before it's a mayor in the city and a board of aldermen or whatever you want to call them, and you elect the people who are going to make the decisions. The decisions have to be made that, I've said it for a long time, we're not a small town. We're not a small town anymore. We haven't been for a long time.
So
Go ahead.
look how much debate, the simple question of, should we elect a charter commission to study the issue of going to SB2
Right,
as not really, it's not a change in government, it's a change in methodology.
right.
What you're talking about, potentially down the road, somebody will come in and say, we need to have a mayor. Can you imagine the amount of community debate that's going to happen based on?
Of course. And that's why I'm
It's going
saying,
to be far greater. Actually,
I bet
I
nobody.
think it'll be interesting and possibly fun, except for the annoying little attacks that go on once in a while during that kind of stuff. But I think it's an
But-
interesting debate that at some point will come the community's
People
way.
think
well,
we're
I told you
sitting
back in
down. I think we
96, there was talk of it then, and that's 14 years ago, and we were
It
10,000
lost.
people less.
They
No,
didn't
no,
even
we
up.
didn't come up, but it was talked about.
The charter commission then, that was established then, did not put that idea forward.
No, they didn't, because they knew it wouldn't pass. And it wouldn't pass this year either. But there'll come a time. And what I'm saying to you is, if what you do as a group can pave the way towards something that's going to come in the future and make it a little easier to fathom.
All we
don't
can
have
do
that.
is study the question of whether the town should go to SB2. We can't address larger issues.
That's the next vote.
I'd just like to say one thing on that.
Yes, you can.
The type of government you choose has nothing to do with the population or the size of your town. I mean, that's a unbelievable misnomer. Berlin, I believe, or Lincoln is a city,
Right.
and it doesn't
For a
have a great
long time.
population. And I mean,
Long
people think
time.
Salem is a city and it's a town.
Dover's what, 5,500 people?
No, I
don't
just
know.
wanted to clarify that, because people think that if you get so big, you automatically become a...
Big isn't always population. This is a big town with a huge budget.
But it's just a choice
Huge
of
budget.
government.
So-
It doesn't have
so not-
anything to do with
Not
size.
to disparage my friends on the school board, the one or two that might be there now.
Maybe.
In a couple of communities in New Hampshire that have switched over to the city form of government,
Right.
the political motivation was to gain control over the school system. The political motivation that drove the decision was to become a city, to put the school board and their budgeting underneath the mayoral control.
Okay.
And then a couple of communities that later switched back or fought to switch back it was because they realized that for those communities, they'd made a political mistake.
They didn't switch.
And so I would look at a future debate as to whether Londonderry becomes the city of Londonderry or city of Nutfeld or whatever, they want to change the name while they're doing that too.
Never know.
I would look at that as, boy, won't that be an interesting debate? Because that's when all of these things come out. What are the motivations for the change? Who's behind the motivations? And if certain persons' names are tagged to being behind the motivation, oh, they just want to be mayor. It's
Right.
it's going to be an interesting time, and I'm kind of hoping I'm not here. Because I don't want to deal with it. I don't want anybody putting signs in my yard for something like that, because
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right, thank you.
don't bring it up next year, please.
All right, Reed.
Reed,
This was pretty interesting tonight. A lot out of it.
you are last, sir.
Way to go.
The mayor.
Speaking of the mayor.
Yeah.
To that last discussion, I think there will be 6 people in the audience rather than 3.
Then three.
Here, here.
Here, I
Believe me.
agree.
There will be no discussion. There will be no thing because no one is interested.
Playing baseball and soccer.
As far as your $5 million, Steve, as far as your $5 million lowering, every school board I've been to has mentioned how much lower the number of children are getting. So therefore, it may not go up to 30. It may stay at 22 because it's going down lower. So that's the thing I noticed there. Between 89, when I retired, and 96, when SB2 came into your division, I think there was more people at every meeting for the school board than there was for the deliberative session. Any one deliberative session. The towns sort of stayed static even, which leads me to the final statement that I have no idea whether Mr. Hessler went to every meeting in his 6 years or not, but unless you get your feet wet and get into the at least one or two meetings to see whether you enjoy them or not, listening to them on TV or reading about them in the newspaper is not the same thing. You've got to be in there. I've been 21 and counting, I hope. Carry on.
Thank you, Reed. Just to answer a question that was asked a little while ago about the school district charter, Marty's actually did a little quick research. From his research, it looks like it was passed in March of 2000, the current form, effective in July of 2000, then amended in 2001, 2003, and 2004.
So it wasn't 96. Wasn't that long?
Just about 10 years.
Wow.
Right.
So roughly 10-year period.
The ceiling hasn't fallen down yet, huh?
I think it has, Al, because there was 1,300 people in those meetings making decisions that,
Well, you're
And ju-
again assuming that it's
I
because of the
would love
change, that the depreciation.
well, no, it was because we took town meeting away from
Can't
both.
be, because I was on the budget committee for 3 years.
You're gonna force me now to go sit at the library and look these up.
Yeah,
Because
I
I doubt very seriously.
I
it was
can't
just-
believe it was 2,000.
I can't believe that.
Well, it's on the school district website.
Is it? Then it's
Yes, it
wrong.
is. The charter, yeah.
It's from the school district.
The charter in
Was Rich-
2000,
So, anyway, enough of that.
the wording in here was that the
Discuss
charter in 2000,
Then that
March
wa-
2000, was to make the
Quorum?
quorum 500.
Okay, so we
4%
had but we had
Yeah.
already been to the
Right.
SP.
So, okay,
the quorum
let's
change
stop,
came
all
in
right.
2000.
Let's stop, because that's a moot point anyway. History is a moot point for this kind of stuff. We've got several other agenda items to talk about.
All right, let's go.
Right.
Why do-
I won't engage in comments about rebuttal comments, because we've got to move on. So that concludes what we're doing. We got Charter Commission discussion. There are 4 specific items that we have to discuss. The first one is additional guest invitation approval. The Charter Commission wrap-up, which is the steps that we need to do to wrap up our business. Approval of minutes, and then any other business that any Charter Commission members want to bring up. So the first one, additional guest invitation approval. The first item on there is Secretary of State. There's been an issue with coordinating somebody from the Secretary of State's for Monday nights. It seems to be an item of difficulty. I've asked Dave to look at, okay, what other night of the week might be a more appropriate night. Then the other question is, you know, if Dave comes back and says, Tuesday or Thursday or Friday or Saturday morning, does the Charter Commission want to have a meeting on another night of the week? And before we even go and push Dave to get that done, do we still believe we have a need for the Secretary of State, David Scanlon or somebody from the Secretary of State's office to come and appear?
When do we have to have this done?
Huh?
When do we have to have this done?
We have to have our final report, I was looking at that earlier, our preliminary report has to be into the council by August 26th.
I say no, Secretary. We don't have time.
If we're gonna have anybody, I think it would be beneficial to have the lawyer come back, because
Right.
there's a whole list of questions, yeah, that we still need to get clarification on.
I mean, what are we gonna get from the Secretary of State? What do we want?
The suggested invitation for the Secretary of State was to talk to us about, in a way that would confirm answers we were getting locally anyway.
The reason why I brought up the Secretary of State, because there are issues, even the town manager says, that because the DRA's interpretation sometime is different than the Secretary of State's, and it goes back and forth. And then, of course, there was one that I sent out, I'm hoping everyone got a chance to look at that, from the Coalition New Hampshire Taxpayers, on that SB2, on that, what do they call it there, they had a big thing on it.
Yeah, so you sent out an email suggesting that we have that.
Suggested they would look at it, saying that Ed Neal, who's been working with many towns throughout the state on SB2, who is one of the most duty experts in this area, would be an asset, or even if you looked at his Microsoft, what do they call that show that he's got on there? PowerPoint presentation, if you look at that, it gives you an idea, it breaks it down, because like I said, this guy, his coalition's taken many towns to court in different issues, like with the DRA or with default budgets and other stuff. So they're very well known in these areas. That's why I threw that out to you.
I'm just nervous we're gonna have a tough time making August 23rd, or 26th.
So
if we don't
that's why
start.
I put that up as an agenda item, is so that, rather than me alone continuing to pursue inviting people, because we talked about it here, or there were suggestions to invite people, I think, Chris, you correctly responded with just a very brief email, and then I'm actually happy we had no further discussion, was that that's an item that should be discussed in a meeting. Dave confirmed that we can have scheduling discussions via email to line up our schedules and to line up scheduling of resources, and that those don't create any 91A violations or right-to-know violations. So that's all clear, but we're having this discussion here. Does a consensus number of the commission feel a need to have Secretary of State return or show up in the first place?
How many times have you tried, Brian?
We've had scheduling conflicts with him for like 2 meetings in a row, and potentially Monday nights seem to be a problem. So the last discussion was pick an alternative night that would work for him or another person to come, and there's been no communication back of the alternative nights.
I'm gonna be there tomorrow morning anyways, and I could walk right in there and see what's going on with him if you want me to, and then call you.
Well, let's wait and see what the commission feels about, does the majority feel we need to have Secretary of State come?
I'll start
And
out.
it's not the Secretary of State, it's a
Is that
representative from the
representative?
office, just like the,
No, from me.
so do we want to show of hands?
No?
I'd like to have him, because of the discussion that came up just tonight with what went on with the representatives from the DRA. Who knows what other questions may pop up.
Okay, so I'm right now seeing 2 no and 2 yes.
I'm gonna go change to the yes, so count me as a
We
yes.
thought you were
I
a
was already
yes all
counting you as a
along.
yes.
thought you were a yes.
No, I actually said no, because of, if you get somebody from the Secretary of State, we gotta make sure he's the one that specializes in that area, rather than just sending
And he's
somebody down here.
Dave's identified Dave Scanlon as the right person.
Okay, yeah, Dave's good, yeah, yeah.
On the other hand, you could change it any night you want, wouldn't bother me.
Any night?
Well, no, if you want to change it to some other night to make that happen, feel free.
Well, what I wanted to do is find
Well,
out.
first find out if we want a meeting.
I don't want to force somebody to come here on a night that they're just not ever available.
I understand that too, and that's why I asked, I said, Dave, come back with 3 different dates.
Did he come back with any dates?
Not yet, he's waiting for this vote tonight.
Okay.
So, I hear 2 no's, 2 yeses.
I mean, I think as many different opinions as you can get is, you know, better for us. I mean,
Is that a 3rd yes?
yeah.
I agree that
4th yes?
questions always come up.
5th yes?
I see if you can get here in the next week.
Next week?
Right.
I mean, if he can
For
come
what
like in
amount of time?
August, then no, I would say no.
Okay, so if you can't come.
We've
if
got
it's-
time
all right.
constraints.
Yep.
and
That's what I'm
So it has to
concerned
fit our
about.
time constraints.
So, you know, if we're looking at, if we want him to come in, that's fine. If we need a different day, I have no issue with that.
So Al, if you can stop in tomorrow, and I will also contact Dave, and if we can set something up in the next couple of weeks, we have a time frame. We need to get
next
to
meeting
the
we
business of a
We
decision.
have an
Now,
idea
Al,
of
but
like
we
an
can't wait
alternate
for 2
date
more
or
weeks.
day.
It's
okay.
gotta be
Better.
right away.
Is there a better night?
We
Is there?
might have to have an extra meeting.
Brian, when do you want
Not
him?
Wednesdays for me.
Our next meeting, it says July 12th. Is that what you want him here?
Those are the next ones that are scheduled, so
Okay.
Yeah,
those
but
are
that's a
Monday
Monday,
nights.
and it
Those are
seems
the
to be a Monday.
problematic.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go in there and beat them up and say Monday is what we need and see what happens.
So let's look at it from another
Right.
thing. Is there a night of the week that works better for the majority of the commission? Now, Marty has a specific
Can't
issue
say
with
Tuesday,
Wednesdays.
you gotta keep away
Oh,
from
you can't do
Tuesdays.
Wednesdays?
School board.
No, but it doesn't have to be this room. We can always meet in another room. I mean, it's nice to meet here, but there's still other rooms
Right,
available.
yeah.
Oh, Wednesday, the meeting room is not the issue, because we can meet in the school district
Right.
off,
Right.
meeting room. We can meet in the library.
For
There's,
instance, right.
we can meet at the actual, it was, other rooms not the issue.
So
It's the
it-
date, it's the night.
It'd
And
have to be a
Wednesday night is
Tuesday or
problem-
Thursday.
Problematic for you.
It'd have to be a Tuesday or Thursday then, right? I mean, if it's not a Monday, I know he's gonna wanna meet on a Friday. So it's just a Tuesday or Thursday night.
And you're
then.
gonna have to make sure doesn't have a school board meeting on Tuesday
So
night.
is it Thursday nights? Is there a so that's the
Thursday
question.
night is fine with me.
Is Thursday nights okay with the majority here? So
So,
the question
Monday
then
or
is,
Thursday?
the question is there a Thursday night available in the schedule in the next three weeks?
No, because I get Old Home Day, my final meeting, the 3rd Thursday of July.
See, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I'm out. Well, maybe
I'm gonna try to push him for July, the 12th or the 15th. Is that good?
The 15th is a Old Home Day meeting, Kathy points out, so
Oh,
there's a
15th.
the 1st,
I can
the
do
8th,
anything else
and the
but that,
22nd,
because
and
it's
after
our
the
last
20
meeting.
The
before
first is this
event.
week, so I'll forget that.
So
Oh,
the,
that's true.
so the 8th and the 22nd, and after that, I think we're getting into
Okay, so,
schedule difficulties.
That's it. And
so I'll ask him about the 8th, all right?
I'll ask
And you
Dave to
ask
ask
the
him the
8th
same
too.
thing.
Why don't you ask him what days he's available in the next 2 weeks, and we'll just,
They're not getting any answers, but if we confront him face to face, I'll,
but if he says a Thursday night, Steve might not have a school board meeting in the next week, because he's on the off every other week, so find out what dates he's available, everybody's look at their schedule, and then we can
You can do
say,
all that by email.
and that we can do by email, that we won't get in trouble doing by email.
So, the district has this meeting room booked on the 13th of July.
Okay, so
They
that,
show no meeting on the 6th, or the 20th,
what
or the
about the 8th of
27th.
July?
okay, so that week of July 13th and 15th are 2 bad days. Everything else is fine.
Is the 8th
So-
open, Brian?
7/6, 7/8, 7/20.
7,
That's what it just said.
You're going too far.
Yeah, I think that's way
Yeah,
too
that's
far.
way too, yeah, because we got the 26th.
We still have a month after the 20th.
Right,
But 2
I
meetings.
think the 20th would be, I think one of those, I think those 3 nights, that's
okay.
7/6,
The
7/8,
only
or
day I
7/20.
can't make is the 15th, otherwise,
I'll be hanging with you.
right.
So those are the dates. So Al, if you can bring that up, and I'll also
Okay.
go through Dave.
Let me make sure I got it right. 7/6, 7/8, and then 7/20.
Yep.
Okay.
Those are our
Along
last
with the
3
possible, the
opportunities.
7/12.
Right, yes.
Yeah, which we already got scheduled on our next meeting days.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, that's a
yeah,
good point.
Okay.
But it's a Monday, so he's had a problem with Mondays.
Now, I don't know if we need to bring in, like I said, I brought this guy up, Chairman Ed Nail of that Taxpayers Coalition, Do we need to, because this guy is very knowledgeable in SB2s, and he's, like I said, he's worked with all the towns. If we checked out his website and what I put out for informational purposes, do we need to?
So again, that's a majority.
Yeah.
What's the majority?
I mean, if we could
feeling?
piggyback him on the same night as we get the guy from the state, I mean, I don't see why not.
Is he just one side of the opinion?
He's one side. He's gonna tell you the benefits on his experience with
He's for
SB2.
SB2.
He's for SB2.
Very, very pro.
You know,
SB2.
yeah, very pro taxpayers, no raising taxes, fees, and things like that.
Probably should get somebody that's against it too, just to be fair. I mean, I guess we could have Reed speak.
We got
again.
Reed.
I
Yeah.
typically try not to share my own opinion before asking everybody else there.
I don't care.
I'll share my
Just
opinion.
keep
Myself,
meetings.
I'm more interested in those that are in positions of governance and those who are citizens in town. And I understand he's fully in
Right.
favor of SB2. It's one more voice and one more position and one more opinion on being fully in favor of SB2, but he's also not from Londonderry. We do have to schedule like a final public meeting, public hearing before we take our vote. The last opportunity anybody has to really come in and speak their opinion before we vote on what this report is gonna say.
I mean, there's no reason why he couldn't come in and make a public comment if Al wanted him to come in. I mean, unless because he's an outsider, you don't,
He has a canned PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, it'd probably be easy just to look at the presentation, get an idea what's out there,
online.
and yeah, and then that's probably what he's gonna say when he comes in.
So, let's,
Oh.
show of hands, how many people want him, how many people don't?
Let's see.
Show of hands, how many people want him? One.
Make sure you ask how many blanks there are.
How many blanks? How many people abstain?
No, blanks, like, who cares?
Blanks.
Oh,
Like,
who cares? Yeah.
Who cares?
Is that what you're saying?
It's kind of a yes/no thing. You want to invite him or not?
If he's here, I'll listen to him and be respectful. If he doesn't come,
Okay.
he doesn't come.
So Al, if you want to invite him to a future meeting or public comment, feel free. Right? If he makes it the night, you invite him, but we can't keep a running kind of like expectation, like we've done this with some of these other people, and it's not working out. Granted, it's summertime, people have vacations, there's a lot of other things going on in everybody's lives.
we're having Peter in again with the form, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that'll be a nice exercise.
and I think the forums will add a lot of meaning to it. So,
I think this was very productive tonight, because some of the stuff that came out, mine started clicking and other things popped into mine. And so, a lot of information.
Okay, so, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, we have 2 months. Okay, so we're gonna maybe have one extra meeting, maybe we have 4 scheduled meetings, one of which is gonna be public comment. One of them has to be a vote.
And
One
a
of them has to be
form.
paperwork.
Right.
So really, we still don't have answers from the lawyer, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So I guess are we gonna schedule meetings every week to get this done? I mean, it's.
No.
So if we're looking for the biggest bang for our buck, how are we gonna schedule the next 2 months to get everything done and meet our deadlines?
Good point.
Good questions. So our next 2 meetings, we have scheduled, we have 7/12. Right? We have 7/26.
We didn't do anything in August.
Yeah, August we have two, because
We
we have to
have,
be done. A public hearing, we said, was
Right, but
gonna
it's
be in
not- I can't
August.
remember, but
We
it's not
have
like-
Ninth
the 9th of August,
and the 23rd.
and we have the 23rd. Now, we know that our report is due on the 26th, right? So the 8/23, our discussion then was that we would have final vote and approval on our report,
Right,
which
would
means
be
we have to have
tweaking
done
it.
the work to have drafted
We
it.
have to have one
But we would
first.
have the report done,
Yeah.
and we were gonna tweak it on the
We
23rd.
still need to find out, are we gonna draft a recommended, charter change, SB2 type?
We're
Or
doing-
how we do that? We were supposed to get that from the lawyer.
That's why the lawyer questions are the
yeah.
big,
That's a big answer right there.
Yeah.
and there's like 10,
Then we know how much work we gotta do.
13.
13.
There's a lot. So that's why we're having this discussion tonight, to close everything out,
Exactly.
right? So,
So if one of those is gonna be public hearing, right?
Actually, we said every one was, we were gonna take.
Yeah, we are going to take public hearing in August, Al, because we wanted to get
Final
input
input from the
from the
town.
people after
Right.
they read our report, which
I
we haven't
disagree
even
with
written yet.
I disagree.
No, the, kind of the thing that we have to do is we have to vote
And whether we're going to do anything.
on whether we're gonna do anything. And if we vote that yes, we are going to go forward with the recommendation, then we have a position report and a minority report.
But what happens if the minority doesn't want to do the report?
They don't have to.
I'm not right.
It was a movie by Tom Cruise, and it's an optional report on our part. So, my belief is we need to schedule a public hearing for the 7/26 date to allow time to,
You mean we're having another meeting? Oh, no,
Public
public
hearing.
hearing on 7/26?
an invited public hearing, final opportunity for the public to come and speak for and/or against.
26th?
Yeah.
I thought that's when the report was due.
No,
No, 7:20.
7/26.
August 26th is when
So then I guess we need to hear from the lawyer on the 12th,
And the Secretary of State.
which
And
it
Peter with
needs
the
to be
form.
before the 26th,
Hear from
obviously.
both of them the same, we could do both of them the same night. I mean, it's not, doesn't preclude us having an actual longer meeting. I'd like to avoid it myself, but
Well, I mean, but if the Secretary of State can't come on the 12th, if it's an alternate day, then, which is fine, then, we
But
can,
it's got to be before the
6th.
right.
I'm just gonna tell him Kathy's buying him dinner. Come on down.
Don't want to go to dinner with Dan.
You're not gonna cook?
I'm not going to cook.
so, let's go back to
I'll make some hot sauce.
7/26 is the date that I suggest we have our final public hearing. Is,
Sounds good.
everybody agree with that?
7/26?
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's our final public hearing. At that night, that meeting, we take our vote.
So if we don't get the guy in from the state on the 12th, or one other day before that, then
Yep.
we just don't do it.
Yep.
I hope we hear from this lawyer.
So we have the attorney come on
We've
the
got to
meeting.
have the attorney out.
We have the attorney come on the meeting of the 12th. Right? So we get all the questions to him before that. I have a collected list.
Now, why wouldn't we have the attorney after the public hearing? This is, I don't know.
Because we need to have the attorney come in to answer remaining open questions. We want the Secretary of State to come in to confirm some things, and he's the expert on the advocacy of this, so we want that to happen. Then
Just
we-
wondering if things come up at the public hearing that we can't answer, but the attorney can.
We should probably have him there as backup. No? No? Why? Oh, that's true. But
We can have him there the same night. We just pay him to be here for the entire meeting. And we don't have him here by the 12th. See, what I'm looking to do is try to get the information we need, then we go into a public hearing, we hear from the public, then we take our vote.
Brian, we don't need the paperwork for the public hearing then, right? Is what you're saying?
The paperwork,
Then
We don't have to have the report,
Peter
no.
Okay,
Curtis.
then I would say, let's do the public hearing and do the lawyer questions and have the public here,
See,
because
if we,
that's where we have the most questions. He's the one that's gonna answer them, and that's where we could generate questions from the public. So do him as a combined.
so the thing about this is yes, there are some people here who know certainly exactly how they're gonna vote. There are others here who have pretty well not indicated a decision. So if this is theoretically all voted down, we're not gonna recommend a change, we don't really have a report. We voted not to recommend a change, boom, you're done. That's the report. There's no change that goes on the ballot next
But
year.
we're just having a public hearing. and-
Yes, so,
And we would vote at that point if we wanted to move on, and we didn't. So I don't see what the harm is having the lawyer that one night here to answer everybody's questions, including ours.
So if there is a question that comes from the public, or our own questions, all right, so we invite the attorney for the night of the 26th.
And then we write we were gonna write the
Agenda item.
report after that date anyways, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
We only know that
Because
there's a
the
requirement to
DRNA
write a report
We could
based on
have
how we
some
vote.
questions come up with the lawyer, I mean, when the secretary, if he does.
So we'll have
come.
the public hearing and,
The lawyer.
so you won't have him here on the 12th?
No.
So you do the lawyer answering our question on the 26th and then have a public hearing. It's only a 2-week difference, Chris. And what would happen is he would answer all our questions, then we'd open up the public hearing. And he'd be here to clarify any questions. Because we're going to have to make the vote on the 26th anyways.
I'm just envisioning, if we don't have our questions answered already, I mean, there may be stuff that comes up in the meeting with the public hearing, but I'm just thinking that,
Can he answer the questions via paper?
Yes.
And email them to us so we can
Well,
have them?
that's the intent after this
And then he's
meeting, is
just
to
here for the
email
one
him the
thing?
questions in advance.
Okay, email him the questions and then just have him on the 26th, because then we will have had time to absorb the answers to our questions, and we can ask him during the public hearing.
Because if he shares the answers to those questions with, as soon as a majority of the board has it, it's public, and that's something that should occur in public.
right.
So that, we cannot do that by email.
And
So then he can
As
give
a-
us our answers on the 12th.
sort of a point of order too, is that we actually decided in a couple of our first meetings that we would not have non-public discussions. Right.
But what I'm saying, so then you could hand out all of his answers on the 12th and just have him physically here on the 26th, so he's only here one day.
Yes.
Yeah.
We could do that.
Because we could release his findings on the 12th. He could email to you, and you publicly give them to us on the 12th.
And release them to the,
To public, and then we have 2 weeks to digest them, ask questions, and then
He
open the
might say he's
public
not
hearing.
comfortable that, and he'd rather be here, so check with him.
Well, I know at least one person is watching, because I got a text saying, pay the damn attorney and let's move on. You know,
So-
so you get all.
Wait, was that the attorney's
wife? Yeah, so you get the answers.
No, I know who that is.
is that the attorney?
No, that's, I know, that's the new lady that lives
They
in
said,
Hall
pay the
Road.
attorney, and, no, she hasn't moved in yet. You know, and so you get the answers all at once and move on.
Who are you emailing?
you.
You're not supposed to do email during a meeting.
I wasn't in the bylaws. Wasn't in the rules.
He disclosed it publicly. We received a
He
communication.
didn't share it with the majority, so we don't have to know. Okay.
Okay, so then we have a meeting scheduled for the 9th of August to discuss the report that we are going to issue in whatever context it is. So if it's a no vote, I think that greatly simplifies things. If it's a yes vote, then we have a report to discuss. And part of that is, the item I had under Charter Commission wrap-up was report format discussion.
Can I stop you there for a second?
No.
If you said if it's a no vote, what if there's a let's say it's a no vote, and there's a minority and majority, does it still go to the voters?
If there's a no vote recommendation from this Charter Commission, there's nothing that goes to the voters,
Okay.
unless somebody wants to go get the petitioned required number of signatures. The Charter Commission's work is done with the no vote.
I'm tired of getting signatures.
Good, that's a good answer, Al. That was a good answer, Al.
So on the 9th, we may have a meeting to discuss the report, and it may be a minimalist report based on whatever. But under the assumption that it's a yes vote, there's been a couple of comments made about what this report would actually contain. Now, some of that is the people concerned about the volume and how we're gonna write a report, who's gonna write it, are we gonna try to write it by committee? Writing a report like this by committee can be kind of unwieldy. So my thought is if we decide the report format, as in the topic matters, and we create an outline or a straw man, and then we ask if anybody wants to volunteer to write sections, or the whole thing, or review. Whatever we do, in a lot of contexts, we normally have these things supported by staff. That isn't the case this time. This is the Charter Commission's actual report. We can get some staff support for certain activities to do with it, but it's ours to write. So we need to determine
You're elected.
the format.
I have that the draft is due the 9th, is that not right?
The schedule that Dave gave us in the book, all right? There's a schedule.
Yeah.
The draft is the 26th.
The committee issues a preliminary report by August the 26th, 2010.
Isn't there some kind of a formatted for the SB2? I mean, isn't there
There's
something
no
somewhere
There's
already?
no, we asked that question before, there's no standard report. There's a variety of ways it's been done in different communities.
And Brian? I would recommend maybe some of us start taking a look at what some other towns, just in case. Take a look at the charters on how they are and get an idea or some type of flavor, because we're gonna sit here and try to reinvent a wheel that might already be out there.
Are all we saying is, yes, we want to vote SB2, and no, we don't? And
Yep,
the
that's it.
committee, I mean, I don't understand what we need this 25,000-page
I
dissertation.
think it's gonna be pretty simple.
And we agreed as a board, and here was the vote, and these are the reasons, and that's it.
If the question we had was, we gotta find out from the lawyer, should we make the changes now?
You can't
For the
now.
No, you're not listening to me. So the voters, when it goes forward to the voters, does it have a charter change? That they'll get to vote that this is our recommendation? Or is it just, we recommend we go to SB2, you'll vote on, then we'll come back, vote a new
becomes a
charter in
charter
another year again?
Change what we
So
recommend.
Don't
when
make
the
sense.
voters vote in March, assuming we have a yes vote, when the voters vote in March, they
Regardless.
actually vote on an article that approves a change, and the backup or supporting documentation for that change is the actual charter amendment,
Right.
is the actual language.
Right.
So the question that we have to be asked is, do we draft the amendment? Or is that something left up to the town staff after we provide the report that says,
I would think,
I would say, we did this with the charter change to on the school, the number of people that needed to show up to vote. And we provided that we wanted it to drop from 500 to 350, and the attorney wrote it up.
But the town
So we would give guidance, let's say that the majority of the vote of this
Attorney would
board
write it
said
up for us.
change to SB2, and the majority of this board said the quorum should be 6 people, and then we tell the attorney that, and the attorney writes it up. And then that
So it becomes a very
is
simple
what we voted.
right.
at that
Yeah.
point.
Because
I don't think we
And I
have
made
to
up
worry
what
about
I made up those
section
results
2
completely.
C
I know,
dot
but that's what
5.
we need for purposes
What
of
else is there?
discussion.
I don't think
We're
that's
not
what-
allowed to look at anything else that I
if
can
we
think
didn't
of.
do a charter, we would have to have a new election to vote to write up the charter, right?
Al, if,
is
all
it,
we can
guys,
talk
this is it.
about is this SB2. If you want to change the charter, you have to
Never said
come
I
with,
wanna change the
no,
charter.
any more
SB2.
changes. Okay,
There's
if
a
you,
lot of things that is a puzzle for SB2. Each piece has to fit. That's in accordance with the
I
RSA.
thought we were just voting on whether it goes to ballot vote or not,
That's all we
period.
vote on.
Wasn't that what the wording was on the warrant, was
Yes.
The only
to
other two
see
items
if
I can think
everything
of is
becomes
this
an official ballot?
Quorum, and then the concept that I floated tonight, maybe, does the deliberative session, how could that go on the ballot? The deliberative session's opinion.
And I think that's
That's it.
that's something we we would not
No.
vote on.
No,
We
that would
just
be the
provide
body
that.
of the people at the deliberative,
If we vote on that, Steve, I think that's nothing more than a recommendation.
right.
The governing body then decides what goes on the ballot.
Attorney question.
Attorney
See, that's what we don't, that's where you gotta get to.
I mean, it was
We don't
pretty
have the governing
simple,
body
what
make the
the,
decision.
what we voted on was, all we were determining is if everything was gonna go to, ballot. And by everything going to ballot, you got a deliberative, and we just had to set the grounds for the deliberative. But they are already RSAs that guideline everything.
So I'm gonna ask a question based on the way it was put to me by a member of the public, not through text message, but they just asked me.
Yeah.
So, you're gonna have a report, and you're gonna have a minority report. The people who vote no get to vote on what goes into the other report, and do the people who vote yes get to vote what goes into the minority report?
No, because it's a vote, it's a report after the fact, just like on a Supreme Court. They give a
Somebody issues a
dissertation of
minority opinion.
opinion, and somebody issues the approval opinion, and then, and that comes after the vote.
So do we think we need just a handful of pages to cover what we did with the minutes attached, any exhibits we looked at? And we package that together and here it is.
And then the lawyer takes I mean, it's pretty, I would think we kind of work the same way the Supreme Court works. We vote. A decision's made, we approve, the charter recommendation, it goes to ballot. Here is our majority report, here's our minority report, so that if somebody's interested to see how and why we all came up with the vote we did, they can read that. Then it goes just to the ballot. And if it's approved, at that point, the charter's changed. The charter doesn't change till the voters approve it, at which point the language would have to be written up, and at that time, I would think the lawyer would write it up. And wouldn't be our responsibility to worry about if we've covered section 4A.:1 of C paragraph 3. You know, you know what I'm
Is that
saying?
the real
Right.
reference? 'Cause I'm writing
No, I
it.
know, no,
Brian,
but I'm just saying, we don't have that technical.
Okay.
I have to disagree with my friend Kathy, because it's a charter change, even though they voted in the SB2, any changes to the charter has to be a charter commission. The governing body, if I'm not mistaken, does not have that authority.
That's what we
Am I
are, the
missing
charter
something?
commission. We are the charter
No, but
commission.
if we're not gonna do the charter, even though we're making our recommendation SB2, if we're not sending any
A lawyer in
language
12
with
to pay 'em
SB2
both
for the
days.
town, that means a whole new charter commission has to go forward to come up with the language for the, to make the changes to the charter.
So the specifics of this are this, right? The Charter Commission was elected to study the question. We study the question.
Right.
We issue a report. What we say in that report is what goes on the ballot. The town council, the elected five body, they're out of it.
Right, they
We
have
have
no
nothing to
say.
say.
I agree, that's why I said what I
That's by
said.
law,
That's-
that they're
they-
out
they
of
have-
it.
They have nothing to
Right.
say about it. So the specifics of the amendment, it's purely based on our report.
Certain things.
And the lawyer don't have any right writing up without the people voting on what he writes up for the charter change, for the questions, or the way it's worded.
That's the other part of this, is that we issue a final report in October 26, 2010. So we have 2 months between the time we
Right,
initially,
to get
we
some answers.
release a draft and we release a final.
Right.
I think that's ample time to have the draft language of what the change is prepared and put in front of us, and we vote to release it as part of the final report. And we're done. I think between August and October, the work is easy. The meetings are easy. We require one
Just to approve it.
to approve the final report.
Amen.
Where are we?
We got a
No,
while to
I just
go
wanna
yet.
We'll approve the minutes.
Oh, that's
I
right.
just want to
Still haven't done
recap
the
that
minutes.
what I hear is the consensus that the report is a minimalist report, that we don't need to expand a great amount of detail, or, you know, is that what everybody else feels? We need to just document the facts of what we're presenting, package up the questions we've asked, package up the answers we've gotten.
I'll agree with that if the lawyer tells us that we shouldn't write up what the charter changes for this town should
Okay,
be.
that is actually one of the
In accordance with the SB2, I'll agree with that on a small report.
I'm sure if we ask, none of us are charter writers, lawyers are.
But
So
it's
I'm
still-
sure we've got an opportunity to request some staff assistance here. So once we get to that point.
Right, but the people still have to vote on another charter
But
commission if
that's,
we don't move
that's
forward.
the August to October timeframe now, when it gets written up appropriately for it to go to the voters.
So that's one of the questions, is do we draft the change? So one of the other questions is, can we say move it to May? You know,
Move it to
we asked a
May.
whole bunch of different, well, that's an
Right,
option.
So
We
let's just
we
get
have a
the
whole bunch of
answer.
different questions, we'll get those answered, and we'll be done with them.
And just a quick clarification, when we write this report, say it's yes. But is that when we include like a deliberative session, say we agree that it's gonna be 50, so that's part of the report, right? That gets written into the charter change, right?
Right.
If
Yes.
we
So that, I
have,
mean, that's part of what we need to do.
This is what I'm
to
hoping.
Outline how it's
I
gonna work.
think that was one of, in his first meetings, I think Bart said, that all we have to do is say yes and decide if we're gonna have a quorum and what that's gonna be.
so, if we,
Yeah, which is why the May question
Day
came
and
out.
date was something else he said too.
okay, the day and the dates are prescripted by other laws and other things, and she handed us that table.
Yeah, but I mean, we're supposed to pick the ones that we want, what we suggest.
For the deliberative
Suggest.
session.
Deliberative sessions.
Right, so we'll do all that kind of
All right.
stuff.
So it wasn't, I don't think it was ever that we were gonna write the actual wording for the charter. It was what we found, and then it's voted on, and it's,
Well, I'm not comfortable with a lawyer writing, and then that's the law, when the governing body saying, yeah, it's a say, that's the way it goes, because the charter, the people vote on that charter, put a commission in place, and then they put the language in place. So that's why I foresee, by the way we're talking
So-
about it, it'll be a whole nother year if, in
No,
accordance.
it won't be. So we'll go back, that is one of the questions that the attorney has to
Al, it
answer.
says so on the sheet that if we vote on this, it becomes law in the next, at the next meeting or whatever, in one of the,
If we say yes,
and it gets voted approval.
is voted on
Right,
in March
I agree.
And it
of
says yes vote.
2011, and it takes effect on July 1st of 2000.
With no language. That's what I'm saying, which don't make sense, because now you have a town with a charter that's not complete, that matches the SB two.
No, no, no,
Language- the
Al,
language
just
is
like I
the
said,
vote.
Yeah.
if they vote, when it gets
You know
presented
where
to
I'm
the
going
vote,
with
I
this,
know
Brian, on the
exactly where you're
language.
going. So when it goes to the voters, it will say, to see if.
Yes.
Oh, not to see.
Yeah.
We already did to see.
I'll start off
It
with to
is.
see if the
Yeah.
town will vote to
To
approve a
the
charter amendment
commission's
Right.
recommendation.
going to official ballot voting, commas or quotations, SB two, blah, blah,
Deliberative
blah,
session,
with the
quorum
deliberative session.
session, and a quorum of
And
blah,
then,
blah, blah.
and then the specific language of the charter amendment would be in a separate document that would, and Dave has already given us a list of all the paragraphs that would change, many of them by, many of them by omission. They just get omitted because they
Right.
reflect all this other stuff about the other process. They would just get omitted and be replaced. There's like 10 or so. They would be replaced with like 4.
I remember saying that.
He provided it at some point. I think it's still in the book. If not, it's in the handout that he gave us for a prior meeting.
Maybe you weren't here.
Okay?
That answers all my wasted time, but not
Yeah, have them text Marcia to you.
So we'll make sure everybody has it. Again, he gave us specific, stuff at the first meeting. Here's what changed. So we'll go back, we'll make sure everybody has like a complete package. And I think actually a complete package is what we hand in with our report, we say here. And we're good. And then the advocacy campaigning, those for, those against begins and blah,
We
blah,
don't
blah.
have to worry about that tonight.
Somebody else's problem. Okay?
Is that
What do I
it?
do with my agenda?
Or do we have anything else?
Approval of minutes.
Is that the last one?
No.
What's next?
The catch-all, other business.
Well, let's do other business and then minutes,
Make a motion, we approve the minutes.
because that's quick.
I hear a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? No discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes of our last meeting of 5/10?
26,
Wasn't it?
April 26.
26th.
Was,
10th? Was it that?
yeah, we canceled,
Is it the same?
we canceled 2.
Okay.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Minutes are passed. Next item on the agenda is other business. Do we have any other business? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
It's a very productive meeting.
We're adjourned.